durumuna gitmiştik. Daha fazla para kazanmak için. Bu bölgede çok tekstil fabrikaları vardı. Eşlerimizde birçoğu tekstil ve yiyecek atölyelerinde, fabrikalarında çalışması için bu bölge bizim tercihimiz olmuştu. Moorland'a geldiğimizde en sevdiğimiz yer Cemal Dayı'nın kahvesi diye bir yer vardı. O kahvenin içerisinde çorba, berber, her şey mevcuttu. O zaman City'ye gittiğiniz zaman saat 5'te, 6'da her taraf kapalı oluyordu. Biz yine bölgemize geldiğimizde Moorland bölgesine işte Türk kahveleri açık oluyordu geç vakit kadar. Orada da arkadaşlarımızla oturup sohbet ederdik, muhabbet ederdik. Biz ilk geldiğimiz zamanlarda bölgede sosyal, kültürel ağırlıklarımızı yönlendirmek için de 1985 yılında Moorland
Members of the gallery and to our viewers live streaming tonight's meeting. My name is Councillor Natalie Aboud and I'm the Mayor of the City of Moorland and the Chairperson of tonight's Council meeting. It's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's meeting. Our meeting is being held on the traditional country of the Wurundjeri people and I wish to acknowledge them as the traditional owners. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging and the elders from other communities who may be here today. I acknowledge that currently many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people call Moorland home. I also acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people never ceded sovereignty of their lands and have continuously cared for their country for over 60,000 years as the world's oldest living culture. Members of the gallery, please note this council meeting is being recorded and web streamed live to council's website and Facebook. This recording will also be available as video on demand. Gallery attendees are advised that they will be recorded during the meeting. Councillors are reminded that in line with the adopted councillor conduct principles as outlined in the Councillor Code of Conduct, councillors should ensure that they conduct themselves in the meeting with integrity, impartially exercise their responsibilities in the interest of the local community and not improperly seek to confer or advantage any person. This behaviour will support principles for leadership and good governance that secures public confidence in the officer of councillor. Members of the gallery, in the event of an emergency or disruption, we may be required to take action to ensure the safety of attendees. Please follow the directions issued by council staff and security officers. Thank you for your understanding and cooperation. Councillors and officers in attendance. I would like to introduce other councillors in attendance tonight. Councillor Sue Bolton.
Hi, how's it going?
Councillor Anna-Olivia Carley-Hannon.
Evening.
Councillor Helen Davidson.
Hello.
Councillor Jess Dorney.
Evening.
The Deputy Mayor, Councillor Mark Riley.
Good evening.
Councillor Alia Farnley.
Hi.
Councillor John Kavanagh.
Good evening.
Councillor Dale Martin will be joining us, but he's running late. Councillor Lambros Tapanos.
Good evening.
And Councillor Oscar Yildiz JP. I'd also like to acknowledge former Mayor Mark Higginbotham, who's in the room with us. Good evening. And also the member for Brunswick, Dr. Tim Reid. Welcome. The officers in attendance tonight are to my left, the Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Nerina Di Lorenzo, the Director of Community Development, Arden Joseph, the Director of City Infrastructure, Grant Thorne, the Acting Director of City Futures, Phil Priest, the Director of Business Transformation, Sue Vucevic, the Director of Engagements and Partnerships, Joseph Tobacco, the Executive Manager of Finance, Liz Rowland. Councillors, are there any apologies from fellow councillors for tonight's meeting? Well, I've heard from Councillor Martin that he's on the way, so we'll say that there are no apologies and I'll move to requests for leaves of absence. A leave of absence has been requested from Councillor Carly Hannon for the period from the 11th of April 2019 to the 12th of August. So I'll ask for a motion, please, to grant leave of absence. Councillor Riley and Councillor Kavanagh. And is there any debate on this particular item? I expect not. I'd just like to say congratulations. I'm so excited for you. And I'll put that to the vote. So all in favour of approving that leave, and I declare that carried. And I also have a motion for a leave of absence for Councillor Riley from the 11th of April. From the 14th of April to the 27th of April this year. I could have a motion for that, please. Councillor Dorney and Councillor Davidson. Any debate on that item? No. Put that to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried as well. I'll now move to disclosure of interests and conflicts of interest.
Yep.
Finally.
I have a conflict of interest on item DCI 2/19, impact on second-hand rubbish collection on page 69 of the agenda. Happy to explain it when that item comes up.
Thank you. So immediately before we consider that item, I'll ask you to provide details of the type and nature of that conflict of interest, and I'll then ask you to leave the chamber before the item is moved and to return after the item has been considered and voted on. Thank you. Confirmation of minutes of previous meetings. Councillors, could I please have a motion for the adoption of the minutes of the council meeting held on the 13th of March? Councillor Kavanagh, and a seconder. Councillor Davidson, is there any debate on this particular item? No? No comments? All those in favour of adopting the minutes? Against? Declare that carried. Councillors, we've received a petition, PET 319, install speed humps at the corner of Colebrook and Tinning Streets, Brunswick, D19 123697. Do I have a mover for that petition? Councillor Bolton, and seconded by Councillor Riley. Is there any debate on this item? So I'll just ask for a vote in favour of accepting the petition. Against? I declare that carried. Councillors, do you have any petitions to be tabled on behalf of residents? Right. We do?
Yes, we have one tonight coming from the residents of Meeker Street.
Yeah, so this is a petition which will be tabled by the gallery. Yep. So, Peter, if you would like to come forward and present your petition.
Yep. Physically?
Yep.
Thanks a lot.
Feel free to spend a few minutes speaking to it if you like, Peter.
Thank you, Councillor and Mayors. This is a petition from the residents of Meeker Avenue, which is a small dead-end street just off Union Street in West Brunswick. It has about 14 residences, with a mix from small children right through to elderly couples. We're keen to make the most of our streetscape and basically to reinforce what council's trying to do to open our streetscapes up to be usable public open space. So we've had some discussions amongst our residents about what that form that might take, a lot of brainstorming, a lot of ideas coming forward. And so basically we're just coming to council to say we want to increase the safety in the street, we want to make the street a better community place, not only for our residents but for residents in the surrounding streets to use. We'd like to work with council officers to bring this about. There may be things that we might be able to introduce that we want to make sure we've got permission for, and there might be things that council can do in the street that we'd like to work with you on as well. So we've put this petition together. We've got support from people right up and down the street, a lot of enthusiasm, and I'd just like to give a minute to Mia Fung, who's one of my neighbours, who just would like to say a couple of words in support as well.
Thank you, Peter. Come forward, Mia.
I have grown up in our street and learned to ride my bike there. There are other small children there now, and I want their street to be safe. I am keen to work with others to grow veggies and herbs in our street and to have a seat where we can do our homework, read a book, or meet others. If we have lots of veggies, we will have little pantries so that we can share them with others. Imagine a street which we can play in, which is good for the environment and builds a community. Thank you.
Well done, Mia.
Thank you.
So if I could have a mover for the petition to be received, Councillor Riley and Councillor Bolton, hand I saw. There's no hesitation by any of the councillors to support that petition. Is there any debate on this item? No. Put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare the adoption of that petition carried. Okay, so I'll now move to public. I'll just check, are there any other petitions to be presented? No. So I'll now move to public question. Oh, there is? Yep. Bring the petition forward. Thanks, Peter. And feel free to speak to the petition.
Good evening. My name's Peter Chrysomoulos, and we're here in regards to the proposed substation site at 211 Reynard Street. This proposed site is 20 centimetres close to a neighbouring home. It's one of 30 proposed sites for 30 substations that are going to be built, possibly next to homes, if this particular one goes through. It's basically the first of a kind within 50 years of substations being built. So considering what we know in today's day and age, it's quite, we're quite amazed with how this is a site that's been chosen. Also, considering PANZA advises buffer zones due to health concerns, both known and unknown, this is another reason why we don't understand why it's been chosen. PTV was first requested to build the site within a park shore reserve, which was denied. And now they're building their last option at this site. Council has given PTV various possible sites, and 211 Reynard Street is one of those sites. Safety should never be a second thought. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Is there anyone that would like to, I need a motion to adopt the petition.
I'm happy to move
Councillor
that.
Yildiz. And a seconder, Councillor Bolton. Is there any debate on this particular petition?
I think, can I just ask, can we identify what can council actually do and explain to the residents, do we have any power to in fact enforce this to not go ahead?
Who are you directing the
This
question
to the
Phil?
director, yeah.
Thank you, Philip.
Thank you, through the chair. The substation or PTV developing a substation within sites in Moreland doesn't require a planning permit, so council does not have a power to either approve or refuse a site or impose any particular conditions on a site. So the decision in relation to the location of the substation sits entirely with PTV. What council can do though, and what council has been doing, is seeking information from PTV on behalf of the community to address the concerns that are being raised, including noise concerns related to the air conditioning units and expert reports in relation to the electromagnetic field concerns related to substations.
Mayor,
Thank
can I
you.
just, then realistically, the residents really need to continue lobbying your state member of parliament, because PTV falls under the state member of parliament. Not saying that councils won't support your claims, but you really need to be addressing this with the state member and perhaps meeting with her.
Well,
Oh,
actually-
excuse me. Excuse me. In this case, it is Tim Reid, the member for Brunswick, not Pascoe Vale. Excuse me.
Just across the road.
Yeah, literally straight away.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments from councillors on this particular item? I just wanted to clarify that we didn't provide the site. The site was bought at an auction by PTV, just to clarify that one detail. So I'll put it to the vote of adopting the petition. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. And was there another petition? Yep, thanks. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Councillor. I'd like to thank Moreland Council for making an area in the Richard Reserve available for residents to use and to take their pets. And the petition is in relation to the Richard Reserve Dog Park. With the days being short because of winter, the majority of the people are using the space, they use it after hours, and it's very dark, very early. The majority of the users of the park, the women, this place is not close to the street, it's offside, it's 200 meters into the park. There is a safety issue as well. And we were just wondering whether within this council budget or next year's council budget, whether council could make a provision to provide some form of lighting. And we also would like to request that if the decision is going to be made for next year, whether temporarily there should be some form of portable, environmentally friendly lighting that could be made available at the park. It's a heavily used area by the community already. There is a community of people that is growing, so it's a community sentiment, and there is a sense of community building in the area. And the site is heavily used by the council and other organizations. Just recently, there was a massive Ability Festival hosted in there. So that's the issue. I'm here representing the users of the park. We collected about 50 signatures, but I could have collected more, just I didn't have any more time to collect any more signatures.
Thank you, Cesar. So I'll ask for a move and a seconder, Councillor Riley and, Councillor Davidson. I knew your hand was up, although I couldn't see it, but I know this is something that's close to your heart. Are there any people that would like to speak to the petition? No. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Welcome, Councillor Martin. Against, and I'll declare that carried. So is that all of the petitions that we have this evening? Yep. Okay, so now I'll move to public question time. This is an opportunity for 30 minutes for people to raise questions with councillors. I'd like to outline the process. Please note that if your question relates to a matter on any of the reports, this is the time to raise that question with us. Questions can also be submitted online prior to the meeting. A maximum of 2 questions is allowed per person, and questions that relate to a matter listed in the agenda will be dealt with first. When I invite you, you or your representative must ask the question without taking longer than 2 minutes. I will ring a bell at 1 minute and 45 seconds, which means that you have 15 seconds to complete your question. If you have submitted a second question, it may, at my discretion, be deferred until all other persons who have submitted questions have asked their first question, and or not be asked if the time allotted for public question time has expired. A maximum of 3 questions will be heard on any one subject, and we will proceed to the next topic, and if time allows, return to the previous topic. Either myself or another councillor will answer your question, or I will ask the Chief Executive Officer to either provide a response himself or refer it to another council officer. As detailed in the Meeting Procedure Local Law Section 3517, as chairperson, I have the right to disallow certain questions if it is defamatory, indecent, abusive, offensive, irrelevant, trivial, or objectionable in language or substance. If a further response to your question is provided, to your question is provided at tonight's meeting, there will be no further formal response. However, council will action any commitments made answering the question. Question time can only be extended for one 30-minute period, and only for the purpose of responding to questions that are related to matters listed on this evening's agenda. If your question cannot be answered, it will be taken on notice and responded to between now and the next council meeting and reported in the governance report. We have 30 minutes and I want to make sure we hear all the questions. So I also request that councillors who answer address each question succinctly. The commencement time of question time is 7:15. And I've been asked to bring forward a question about the Newlands Road scenario because someone needs to get home to a baby.
It's on the agenda, so.
Yeah, this is also an issue that's listed in the agenda, so it is one of the questions we've identified that we'll deal with anyhow. So Ben Armstrong, if you're around. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you for bringing it forward. There's just a baby over there and a baby at home.
Yeah.
I'd just like to acknowledge the positive steps the report produced, which is about signage, speed indication and policy, and also the proposed installation of pram ramps and bike paths at the Newlands Road and McMahon's Road intersection. It's disappointing that they can't be funded sooner. However, the main focus of this question is about the introduction of the 40-kilometre-hour speed limit on Newlands Road, in particular the 900-metre section of residential area that we're asking for. It's worth noting a few facts about this. To drive along Newlands Road from the start to finish takes about 5 minutes, and if you follow the set speed limit and the recommended speed limit through the McMahon's Road roundabout, the journey takes about 1 minute and 7 seconds. So a reduction to 40 kilometres an hour in the residential section of 900 metres will change this to 1 minute and 21 seconds, a 14-second difference. However, it's worth noting that often the traffic is actually banked up, sometimes to as far as the roundabout in the morning, so that makes that additional time basically irrelevant. The question really does come down to why is it not possible for council to implement or at least support us in the Vic Roads, in campaigning to Vic Roads, to implement a 40-kilometre-hour speed zone along the 900-metre stretch of residential housing. Thanks.
Thank you. Phil? Yep, sorry, Phil. Sue wants to ask a question.
Can I just ask a question of Ben in terms of pedestrian movements across the street? Because I understand Newlands Primary School is one side of the street, so people would have to, what are the sort of, which, what are the things that attract people towards either side of the street?
There is actually a pedestrian crossing. In Newlands Road, obviously, it starts at Coburg Lake, and then the residential section ends at just past the McMahon's Road roundabout. There is a pedestrian crossing in the earlier section, which is traffic lights, but the upper section is an access portal to Newlands Primary and also a major parkland. At the moment, there's actually no way of making an ingression into that parkland because there's no pram ramps. There's no pram ramps at the McMahon's Road and Newlands Road roundabout. So every morning I cross to go to childcare, I actually have to go to a driveway, which then means I cannot see the traffic coming up Newlands Road at all. So you just sort of blindly push your pram across and go, I hope we make it today. There's dog walkers. It's a major portal into the park. So a crossing, there's no crossing there. So most people cross into the middle of the roundabout and then enter into the park. So that roundabout it's actually quite a scary place.
Thanks, Ben. Phil, did you want to address the question for Ben?
Yes. Thank you, Ben. Thanks for the question, and thanks for acknowledging the work that has gone into both consulting with yourself and into the report this evening. In relation to the question of the speed limit, Newlands Road is a collector road within Moreland. It services both a residential area as well as one of the three core main industrial areas within Moreland. In that scenario, a 40-kilometre speed limit would be something that would be supported by council policy and council officers, or recommended by council officers in a local street. In a collector road environment that also services industrial area, then council policy wouldn't support a 50-kilometre speed limit. To change the 50-kilometre speed limit also requires approval from Vic Roads, and its officers' advice to council that it's highly unlikely that Vic Roads would support, in this scenario, in this context, a 40-kilometre speed limit in Newlands Road. Thank you.
It seems...
Sorry, Ben,
Okay, yeah, sure.
Yep. Well, it's about the debate, actually, because otherwise that's not how it works. But what I can say is if you want, I can bring the item forward when we get to the agenda, if you want to hang around.
I'd love to, but
Okay.
we're coming to bed.
Yep. So I'll ask Jill Keppel and Lucius Sorry, I'm having trouble reading the surname, but this is about the West Papua venue hire on the 21st of September. Thank you. Jill?
Jill Koppel and Lucius Itley. Lucius is representing the West Papuan community and happens to live in Moreland as well. So thank you for your time. We have a question regarding applying for a fee waiver to use Moreland Town Hall on the 21st of September for a West Papuan community CD launch. We acknowledge and very much appreciate Council's ongoing support for the West Papuan community by way of the flag raising on the 1st of December and supporting, I guess, a small number of West Papuans in the community as refugees. We believe, well, first of all, we had a very successful CD launch last year. I'd like to show that. This was a special commemoration of a massacre 20 years ago. Sue Bolton sponsored us then, and my understanding is that she is ready to sponsor us again. That CD was a success, and in fact this CD is a little different. It represents a number of artists from the Pacific communities supporting West Papua. Music, Indigenous culture are all very important for West Papuans and I hope for the community in Moreland. I understand it meets Council's objective for connected communities, number one. Social cohesion for multicultural, established and newly arrived communities by fostering opportunities for shared learning and celebration. And it is indeed celebration.
Get to the question.
Well, we're hoping, could we please be able to apply for a fee waiver for the 21st of September for the use of Moreland Town Hall for this CD launch?
So I can actually probably answer that from the chair. This is one of the items that is coming through in the agenda this evening, the consideration of the proposal you've put forward, as a result of the fact that we've changed slightly our hall hire policy, which has actually had a beneficial effect because now we all know that you're having a CD launch, whereas when it was sponsored by one councillor, I didn't hear. So I'm glad to see you here in the chamber, and I can't say what the outcome will be because I couldn't speak for the other councillors, but that will be resolved this evening.
Thank you very much. We look forward to a positive response.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John Englard, if you could come up and present your question, please.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. My question is on the Zero Carbon Moreland Action Plan for 2020 to 2025. And I'd like to ask if there's going to be any boosting of the cycling infrastructure budget under that activity plan. And my second question is the Transport Citizens Advisory Group going to be reconvened and perhaps broadened to involve more groups in Moreland concerned about traffic and transport? Thank you.
Thank you, John. Phil, would you like to address the question?
Thank you, John. It is, at the present time, Council is consulting and working up a program for bicycle infrastructure, and that would form part of a report to Council within either at the May meeting or the June meeting. So we'll be able to chat further about that report. I'm happy for you to contact me in relation to that, both the bicycle and pedestrian capital works plan that's being developed at the present time for Council. In relation to, I guess the similar goes for the Transport Advisory Committee that you're talking about. Happy to have a chat outside of this forum as to establishing that and understanding better your desires in that area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Paul Robertson, I'll get you to come forward and address the meeting.
Thanks, councillors. My question actually comes a little bit out of left field for the normal roles of local government, and so it's probably worth just giving probably 4 factors that drove the question. The first factor was around council's decision recently to purchase some properties in Brunswick to expand open space, which I thought was a fantastic thing in terms of strategic directions for local government. So that was the first factor. The second factor was around the reporting of that actual activity by the Moreland Leader. In the actual Leader article, which I've got here on the 1st of April, the article was quite, I thought, unbalanced and quite prejudiced. It only talked about, if you read it, it seems to be poor decision-making by council to purchase properties above a market rate. So it made it sound like the council decision was actually poor economic management. It didn't balance that against the strategic opportunities about open space. It didn't talk about the necessity for open space with significant population growth. It didn't talk about the strategic benefits over the longer term and different sorts of returns on investment on public property, so public value tests. It was all very one-sided from a pretty real estate orientation, which probably reflects the Leader. The third point then goes to, I think, a general thrust with the Leader and the fact that over time we've gone from a couple of local papers to just the Leader, and then the editorial or the reporting content of the Leader really coming down a lot. So you don't actually get the reporting around local government business. You don't get a bit of a feel for what's happening in the community. Some of the Leader articles and some of the sections are actually not more on specific at all. They actually draw on things from, like the Crime Watch bit comes out of Port Phillip or Glen Iris, or and same with what's available. So it doesn't actually have that local focus. And then the fourth factor is about the role of local government and thinking about that. So for me, there's a value in a democratic process about public scrutiny and accountability. So it was good that the Leader actually ran an article about the that purchase of land, but then didn't follow up on it.
Sorry, Paul, I've just got to get you to turn it
Sure,
into a question.
yep. And so the question then is around the value of local government actually supporting the establishment of some independent media sources. So my question is, would council consider supporting the establishment of independent media source? And that might be around both support, not actually doing it themselves, but providing support for someone else to do it, maybe working with the other northern metropolitan councils to, get some sort of viable scale, and also some innovative models around it as well.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Anne.
I think Councillor Kavanagh would like to answer.
I won't answer the second part, but can I also say, you wouldn't have noticed, but there was a slight retraction in the paper this week.
Okay.
In fact, the article pointed to 2,600 square metres of open space. In fact, the reason why it was actually 4,600 metres of open space, and therefore the agents' valuations, etc., were based on incorrect information. All right, so but I'll leave the second part for someone else to answer. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just refer to the CEO.
Thank you for the question. So I'll answer the second part. So would we consider an alternative source of information and news? I think that's something that we would really look at unpacking. The reason for it is we know that there's lots of alternative news sources also. We've also got citizen journalists. There's actually quite a bit happening in this space. And we know that people like to get their news in lots of different ways. So we're interested in understanding that a little bit more. It would take some time to really work our way through it, but I'm very open to having that further discussion and potentially having a catch-up with you to talk that through as well.
Yeah, great.
Great, thanks very much.
Natalie, can I also just point out the Leader newspaper's right here, so if you've got any questions afterwards, you can raise it with the Leader.
Cesar and Gabriella, if you'd like to come and present the question, or is this the petition? Yeah, okay, sure. So we'll call that presented. Thank you. Okay, so now we've got 3. So I've got the questions on the LXRP project. I've got Vanessa Flynn, Hayley Franklin and Jason Clark, if you'd like to come forward and present your questions. Okay, we've got plenty of time.
Hi, you've got my maiden name, which is Vanessa Flynn, but I'm my married name is Vanessa Birch. Some of you may have received some emails from me.
Yep, sure. That's what
Yeah, so my question is about Gandolfo Gardens and ensuring an alternative space for a construction laydown area is used during the level crossing removals. It is essential that Gandolfo Gardens are retained for the ongoing use of residents and the community. Residents in the area have limited and no accessible alternative open space. The closest park for residents, such as myself, is 800 metres away at Anderson Reserve, 1 kilometre to Robinson Reserve or War Park. It will take another 30 years to regrow these trees. To put that in perspective, I have 3 children. They'll be between 30 and 32 years old by the time those trees regrow to the significance they are today. According to the definitions in the Urban Forest Strategy, which is 2017 to 2027, the trees in Gandolfo Gardens are deemed significant, and moorlands reducing key tree canopy in recent years will further be impacted by the loss of Gandolfo Gardens. What actions does Council intend to take to protect the Gandolfo Gardens and the existing trees, given that Council and our rates have paid for this maintenance for the last 108 years, and residents first campaigned for this open space in 1911? And the second question I have is, can the Council confirm that the LXRP's plans for this space, what the plans are if we can't save the trees? I'll probably tie myself to one if I can. Once construction finishes, because we've noticed the signs have been removed and the name Gandolfo Gardens has a bit effectively been removed from everywhere.
Thank you, Vanessa. I'll ask Joseph to provide an answer for you.
Thank you, Vanessa. I appreciate your question. And through you, Mayor, the current situation is that Gandolfo Gardens is currently situated on VicTrack land, so it's not necessarily owned by council. Therefore, our jurisdiction is somewhat constrained. There has been some recent media attention in relation to some speculation about the proposed occupation of that site. Council has not been made aware formally by the level crossing removal project in relation to the specific nature of that occupation, if and when it is to occur. So we continue to wait, patiently waiting for some confirmation from the LXRP in terms of timelines and further information about the proposal as it currently stands. We'd be more than happy to continue to work with yourself and the community to provide updates as soon as we have information.
Okay, but why did Council take down the sign for Gandolfo Gardens?
I'm just going to allow that as the second part of the question that wasn't.
Yeah, thank you, Vanessa. Council did not remove the sign, so we're not too sure who actually has removed the sign, but we can confirm that it was not Council.
Okay, so I'll just add to that things are not going to happen overnight, and we will definitely keep you in the loop about, and there's a group of you, I'm aware of that, about what's going to happen, but also that, we've got a reputation, and I'm sure you won't be tied to that tree by yourself. So we're keeping a very close eye on it. Yeah, thank you, Vanessa. Either Hayley or Jason, depending on who's coming up.
Thanks, councillors, for taking the question. My question is in relation to the level crossing removal projects also. Since the LXRA information sessions held in July last year, where 2 possible approaches without detailed designs were presented, 2 further level crossing removals have been announced, and the community has not been afforded any further consultation. Given the significant budget, scale and impact on the built environment and the community, my question to Council is, when will we be seeing the actual design proposals, including the location and interface of new station buildings and platforms, impact on the existing heritage-listed station buildings, proposed landscaping and pedestrian and bike paths, and mitigation strategies to address impacts on directly affected residents, including acoustic and privacy impacts? How can the Council represent best outcomes for residents to the LXRP?
Thanks, Hayley. Please, Joseph.
Hayley, good evening. Thank you for your question. Through you, Mayor, not too dissimilar from the previous response to the last question. Council continues to work as much as it can with the community at the moment. We probably don't have a great deal more information to share with you other than what's available on the LXRP website. In terms of a specific timeline, when we're likely to hear from the LXRP in terms of further consultation, we don't know the date at this particular point. We are waiting patiently. However, it is important to note that back in November of 2018, Council moved a resolution requesting a level crossing removal project that they conduct further consultation with the Moreland community on the proposed design for the level crossing removals, which now includes 2 additional crossings at the additional Bell Street and Moreland Road crossings, being Munro Street and sorry, beg your pardon, I've just gone blank for a minute then. Munro and Reynard Street. So at this particular point in time, what we're looking to do is mobilise our communications to provide information and advice to the community as soon as we have advice from the LXRP, but at this point we don't have any dates, so I can't specifically answer that question.
Is there a possibility to for the council to meet with local residents? Because I'm not sure that the council fully understands the real concerns that people do have.
Indeed, Hayley. I actually have one of my officers here this evening who's in the gallery. She'd be more than happy to have a chat with yourself and also the other individual that's here tonight asking a question.
Okay.
I just want to also, sorry, I'll get to you, John. I just want to also clarify that I spoke to Jason, probably feels like 2 weeks ago, but things are not moving incredibly quickly on this. That also we have had no further meetings with the LXRP. And can I just clarify, we're waiting for an announcement from them, is that right?
Through you, Mayor. That's correct. So prior to the state election last year, the announcement was made in terms of the 2 additional level crossing removals, being those 2 streets I mentioned. What we haven't had is further confirmation from the LXRP since the election. So that would be the next logical step in hearing from the Victorian Government in terms of their commitment to the project and the next steps, including consultation.
Thank you. So we'll follow up with a meeting. Yep. We'll follow up that meeting with you guys. And Jason, if you'd like to come forward and present your question. Thanks, Hayley.
Good evening, Mayor, councillors and executive. So we're part of a group that was the No Sky Rails group. As a community group that is supported by over 850 people through signed petitions, I suppose our message to council is we don't want to wait for the LXRP to come back to us and tell us what they plan to do, particularly when there's a massive danger that they're going to come back to us not within a time frame that allows change or a time frame that allows the community to actually tell the LXRP what we really want the finished structure to look like. So with that in mind, we're here not tonight to give concern or to voice our concerns about how the community consultation between the council, the community and the LXRP will be scheduled. We don't think it's right that a $90 million infrastructure spend can just be at the whim of the government of the day and they'll just tell us what they want to do. We need to actually be on the front foot telling them what we want. There's going to be a lot of people affected directly by this and there's a lot of concerned members of the community. We accept that the project will probably go ahead, regrettably, as a Sky Rail. So we do want to take a positive advocacy position. So what we want to ask tonight is what plans does the Moreland Council have, along with the LXRP, in the short term, and by the short term we want to define that as the next 3 months, to meet with affected residents and concerned community members that want to directly address concerns about the designs of the Sky Rail and to ensure that it does not adversely affect further residents' amenities and privacy as a direct result of the Sky Rail being completed very close to residents' homes.
Right on time. Did you time that? Right on 2 minutes.
No.
Perfect. Brilliant. I realise I cut you off before, John, and I didn't come back to you. So
I wasn't going to answer that question. I was going to answer, have you had much contact with the local members? Because we've got, I know the local member, it's a state government project. Yep. Even in the upper house, we've got Jenny Makakis, who's a cabinet minister. We've got Nazir Al-Zamar, who are local members. We've got Lizzie Blanthorne, who's in the government. I mean, it's their project. This is where the consultation should be from, in my view. I'm not saying council doesn't have a role, but we are not it's not our project. It's a state government project. We've got local members who are in the government, one that's in the cabinet. They should be doing something and consulting with the local people. It's their project. But in saying that, I'm happy for someone else to answer the other part of the question.
Can I directly answer John's question?
Yes.
Yeah. So as a group, No Sky Rail Committee met with Lizzie Blanthorne about, I don't know, six or 8 weeks ago to directly address her about what was taking place and so forth, which is probably why we accept that it will be likely to go ahead. But to pretty directly quote Lizzie, she said it wouldn't matter if we had 10,000 signatures as part of our petition to not to be against the Sky Rail. The decision was made, the decision was final, and they weren't changing their mind. The problem that we have with local government members of Parliament is that they hide behind the skirt of the LXRP and they won't directly address any direct questions or answers or provide answers.
Look, I'm thankful for that. I'm pleased that you've had at least a meeting, but like we've got a cabinet minister in the upper house who represents Northern Metro. You know, the things should be happening. That's just my view.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Joseph, and then I'll get to you.
Thank you, Jason. Appreciate the comments and the questions, and also through you, Mayor. We have earlier today tried to reach out to you, Jason, just to say that we're prepared to meet with you and understand the plight of the community and also your own concerns, which you've articulated in your question. So we're more than happy to help facilitate those questions and see what we can do to facilitate on behalf of the community some of the feedback that's coming through at this early stage. What we have been doing from a council perspective is not too dissimilar from any other sort of authority that would be conducting works within our municipality, as we've been providing and signposting to the level crossing removal project a series of council's policy positions in relation to built form related projects, public infrastructure and so forth, which is all available on our website. So a lot of the information, the interactions we've been having is basically pointing to those documents and the positions of council. So I'd be more than happy to have a chat to yourself and others here this evening to progress the conversation and see what we can be doing to help put forward some of the frustrations that you're currently experiencing.
Natalie.
Thank you. Just before we go on, I need a motion to extend question time by half an hour. So Councillor Riley, Councillor Yildiz, all those in favour? Thank you. Declare that carried. I've got Councillor Bolton, then Councillor Riley, and then you, Councillor Yildiz. Councillor Bolton?
I'm not sure if the North Sky Rail Group has had contact with the people in the orange and grey building on Bell Street, the 8-storey building.
Yes,
right
some of
beside.
them are members, yes.
But it's, I certainly believe we need this meeting. Probably not just with you. It would be good with you, but with a wider group, because I think council is, yes, it is a state government project, but I think council is obligated to actually represent the residents or assist the residents in getting its case across to LXRP about various protections around noise, light, and a range of issues that residents are concerned about. So I think we absolutely need to push for that, and maybe for a wider group.
Can I just say briefly?
Hang on a sec. Councillor
Thanks.
Riley, then
my
Councillor
question
Yildiz.
is, I just would like some clarity, please, regarding, because I've had communications with Vanessa and other people today around the relationship between council and the LXRP, particularly with respect to the Coburg Initiative and Coburg Square, because there is some sense amongst the community that we're working in secrecy with them. And I want to just reassure you that I'm not interested in that. We as a council actually try to work in the most transparent way. So I'd just like some clarity around that to try and get some facts in there, because even though that meeting is happening, it's actually a separate kind of process, but it is related. So can we just have that clarified, please?
So you are clarifying
I'm
that
asking,
yourself?
if you could just have it clarified for the community, please.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Riley. I can probably reiterate, I guess, the statement that you've just made. Council, as it does with many agencies through the state government, meet on a regular basis on various initiatives to provide further clarity. The information and the interactions Council has had with the level crossing removal project has been on a policy-related basis, so providing and signposting current positions of Council.
Councillor Yildiz.
What I want to say is, look, congratulations to you, Jason, Zahn, Vanessa, Lynette, just don't lose the fight. The local member might say, yeah, you can bring 20,000. I find that extremely arrogant, to be honest, for her to say that. What I would suggest, Mayor, is that we write a letter. Councillor Kavanagh has highlighted something pretty important. If Makakos is in the Cabinet, I think a letter needs to come from Council advocating on behalf of this group to express if they can't get through, perhaps we can. So even a letter suggesting that they listen to the resident group and meet with them, to Makakos, to Naziel, Asma, to the local state member here, and even to Tim Reid, to say, hey, residents aren't happy. I mean, I know it's going to go ahead regardless, but there are some things that could be amended in the actual whole process so that they, in fact, do reflect some of the things that this group wants. But a letter from you with the council letterhead might have more power than these guys knocking on doors and they're consistently being closed on them. I actually know that for a fact. So I think it's important that we acknowledge what you've been doing. It's been a fight for the last 6-7 months and you haven't let go. And I just want to commend you and the guys. Just keep going, because the only way we're going to get through is by people power. So please do. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you,
Thank
Councillor Yildiz. I have no problems with that proposal. Councillor Tapanos? Yes, thank you. Prior to the state election, we had a meeting here in this chamber, which you would remember, and there was a resolution that was carried. And it was to do just that, to write to them and seek that further consultation. You are correct that there are different models of Skyrail. There are different designs, and some are better than others. And some will mitigate against noise and sound, noise and visual privacy matters, etc., and some are less successful at doing that. So certainly we want to get the best possible outcome. So I'm really glad to see that that residents in particular and council have come to that understanding that it is going to go up. I think it is a fight that has been lost. And, they make their decision based on economic modelling and engineering modelling, not so much politics, in my view. And that's what the engineers have told them, and that's what the most economic viable option is. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have that consultation. We shouldn't be advocating for the best possible solution. So I see us all being on the same page here, and we need to really implement that resolution of October or November last year. And I think that we would find a willingness from the state government to actually do that consultation. I suspect it hasn't happened yet because they're probably not ready. But hopefully we can push them along. Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. I'd like to just draw attention to the fact that we've talked about lots of different members of the lower and upper house who are currently in elected positions. And isn't it a shame that only one of them is in the room? So we'll follow that up with a meeting and with you guys, and maybe what you do now that you have come to terms with the fact that it is going up is along the lines of what we've talked about in some depth about what you like about those projects, what needs to be protected about what exists there, the noise, the obvious things, and we can help to facilitate that as has been highlighted here. Thank you.
Thanks for your time with the question. I suppose it'd be just great if council does acknowledge that if we sit on our hands and we're not proactive in actually trying to get the best outcome, we won't get it.
Yeah, we'll continue this conversation.
Thank you all.
Thank you. So I have now 4 questions here. Maria and Peter Chrysomoulos. Did you say your surname again? Chrysomoulos. Yeah, okay. Sam Locchiano. And David. Sorry, I can't read that. Anyway, these questions are all related to the substation. If you'd like to come forward to ask the questions. So, Peter?
Yeah.
Thank you.
PTV approached the council to build in Shore Reserve, and council denied this to go ahead due to heritage overlay on Shore Reserve. Victorian heritage guidelines state the following: council's goal is to protect elements that add to the area's significance. Not every building or landscape element will be significant. You can often remove, alter, or develop non-contributory elements or sites. It's important that any development happens in a manner appropriate to the significance, character, and appearance of the heritage area. Given above guidelines, rather than dismissing Shore Reserve, why can't Council recommend an appropriate area within the park to suit Council needs and incorporate the heritage significance in the design by ensuring it pays tribute to the location and will complement the area?
Thanks, Peter. I'll refer that to Phil.
Thanks for the question, Peter. It is possible to design buildings within heritage parklands that are sympathetic to the heritage overlay. The circumstances of this particular case are that Council is not asked to actually approve this substation. It doesn't need approval from Council. Council's advice was sought in terms of suitable locations for a substation some 4 years ago, and the advice that was provided back from the CEO at that time was to look at alternative sites to a heritage-listed parkland and to look at commercial sites as a more suitable location for the substation. Thank you.
Maria, would you like to come forward?
In background to this substation matter and in response to, sorry, is it Phil or Bill? Phil? Yep. Council don't need to approve the site, but they actually have a say in moving it back to the park, which was the first preference. So whilst you can sort of say that there's no need for planning permit, we are told by PTV on a number of occasions, as recent as last week, that Council could move it straight back to the park because that's their first preference. So following on from that, with the petition we presented, we have 530 signatures, so I just want to state that for the record. And we've also sought assistance from Tim Reid directly, from PT Minister Melissa and Lizzie, to no avail. Basically, we're just being told what PTV are telling them to tell us, or they're seeking guidance and assuring us it's safe. So in terms of my question, as per my email to Narina on the March 21st, we do not support the integrity of PTV testing of the St Kilda substation, which appeared to purposely ignore the true peak morning and evening periods for that site. Testing was conducted between 8:30 a.m. and 4 p.m, so it very conveniently overlooked the 7 a.m. peak rush and after 5 p.m. period. And then they averaged it over 24 hours, which would appear to favour PTV required outcomes by diluting the results. What are Council going to do to ensure proper independent testing is conducted and provided in a timely manner, rather than accepting PTV's testing, which of course will assure the community that it's safe and meets guidelines as per today's email as well, which they're only going to tell us what they need to get this through. And as I stated, it's Moreland's ability to retract the decision that was made how many years ago, dismissing the park because it might affect tree roots, we might lose open space, and the lower site ticked boxes but was declined.
Thanks, Maria. I'll ask the CEO to respond, and then I think Councillor Tapanos would like to say something.
Thank you. Just through the Mayor, you've touched on some of the key problems in terms of getting information, getting all the right information. So you'd know that we have written to PTV. There's actually been a second one that I've just sent yesterday, I think it was, or the day before, again, to clarify some more of that information. So we've been able to get some initial information, but the nub of the matter about safety is the key thing that I think people still want to know more about, and we want to know more about as well. Yep. I know there's a lot of discussion about should it be in the place located by PTV, or should it be in a park, or should it be somewhere else? In all honesty, where it is, the key issue is still the same. Is it safe? Because it's no better, if it was not safe, to put it in a park than to put it somewhere else. It isn't better, because we actually have to nail this question. We have to know the answer to that. So from our perspective, that's really what we're focusing on. So your question about would we look at, some independent testing, that is some of the discussions that we've had as officers. We're just trying to get a response to what we've done as a follow-up letter that went on Monday. I think it was Monday or yesterday. Sorry, the days are all running into each other. So we have asked for that further information, and part of also, you would have noticed there were quite a few council officers at the consultation. So again, it's a PTV project, but you had the mayor and the councillors there trying to get similarly some answers, and hearing some more of the feedback through that. That's also helped form some of the things that we're trying to work on ourselves. How do we actually ensure the safety? So regardless of where it is, that is the core issue. So just letting you know, we'll look at some of those options as well, and we're doing that at the moment.
Councillor Tapanos and then Councillor
I just want
Yildiz.
to reiterate the comments of the CEO. I guess I've been following this over email, a bit at an arm's distance because it's not my ward, but I have certainly been following what is going on, and I am disappointed about how this is unfolding. I do think that the first thing to do is actually get that information, and we haven't been idle. I think you've heard the attempts to actually write to them and seek that out have been occurring. But I would actually like to see council be a little bit more proactive on this front and maybe make a decision, but certainly only after it's got that information. So I would kind of suggest to the mayor and the council that perhaps really what we need to do here is try to get them to put a stop on the project and work with us to find the best possible site and to work through the details and to certainly get that information first and foremost, which would help make that assessment about what is the best possible site. So I think that is the best way to go. I think we should move away from the language of it's a PTV project, it's not our responsibility. I mean, that's obvious, but really we should get in and get on the front foot here and make it our business as well and see if we can find a win-win solution. We know what needs to happen for the supply of electricity to the trams. We know what their requirements are. We need to get the safety issue and the science behind the safety concerns right, and then we can have an open discussion about available parcels of land, whether that is a council site like a park or another site, or whether that's another private site. We can certainly have that discussion, but if we allow them to just speed through when residents haven't had those questions answered, when we haven't had those questions answered, I think we're not doing our job as a council.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. I wish I had you with me on Wednesday.
If I had to empathise, I wouldn't want that next to my house, and I think this resident in particular has got a good point. I wouldn't want it near my house, and why should she have it near hers? The fact that I wasn't aware that it was going to be at Shore Reserve, I was never aware of that. So if that was the first site that was suggested, it would be good if we actually were informed of that one. Secondly, why does it, exactly what Councillor Tapanos was saying, why does it have to go there? If you go down Cooners Road along the freeway, there's that massive empty block of land there that's doing nothing. How about sticking it there next to the freeway? I'm sure the drivers aren't going to get affected by it, but if you're not going to put it on a park, I don't think we need to have it near a house. So near any homes, regardless whether it's next to your house or not. But there is vacant land, and if we can perhaps make the suggestion and go, well, don't put it near Shore Reserve, don't put it near the residents' houses. However, we've got 4 other options. I know that that land's owned by VicTrack, it's not council land, but fair enough. It's government land, state government land. Why do they want to put it on our land anyway? We own the park. So go and stick it where it's your own piece of land. Just makes sense.
Thanks, Councillor Yildiz. Any other councillors that would... Councillor Bolton.
Question. I was just wondering, has PTV had any discussion with council about the location apart from that 4 years ago? I mean, I know council's had trouble getting information out of PTV, but I just think that the buying a shop, an old shop, where the fence is right on the fence line, the wall is right on the fence line, was going to be asking for, trouble, because obviously residents are going to be very upset with the wall being 20 centimetres away from a house. So But has there been any flexibility from PTV around the location in the recent round of correspondence?
Just through there, so 2014 was when that request was made, and from council's perspective, there's been nothing further from that. So we're not privy to their activities. So we understood that, well, now that this has sort of come forward, and not if or tell me if I've got this wrong, but basically that they went and bought property, that was not something that we were aware of. It's been part of what PTV has done to forward their own project. And then this came back to light when, in the most recent, well, basically in this project being announced, that's when we then became aware of that again. So the short answer is no, 2014, can we put it in this spot? And then from that point, there hasn't been any further discussion. And more recently, I mean, our impression is, well, they've purposefully bought a site. So our understanding is that they've been pretty keen to be able to move on with the project there.
Can I just add a point on that? Because we received correspondence from PTV, probably dated the 8th of Feb, where they approached yourself following the meetings they held with Peter and I and Sam and Carmel on the 6th of Feb and 5th of Feb, and they said, "Dear Mayor, I've spoken with Carmel and she does not want this next to her home. Can you move it?" They would like to move it. So they're telling us that, they've assured us that if you move it, that they will go ahead with changing their plans. And we saw correspondence with a letter addressed to yourself asking for the move back to Shore Reserve. So we're obviously being played by both parties.
Yeah. Look, my comment before, I mean, this project has basically come back out. All I'm saying is we didn't have any further correspondence. Then basically the project was announced and it was at this site. I go back to what I said before. The issue is how to make sure this is safe. Because where you put it, I mean, in a park, it's still exposing people. You know, you
5-10 metres. In 5-10 metres, you don't have any.
I'm sorry, as the chair, I don't think this is going to be finished with. I think we'll all talk more about it. I'm really glad to see some other councillors starting to become involved because it's been a hell of a burden for me and I know it's a hell of a burden for you guys. So I'll just ask Sam to come forward and present his question, please.
Thank you.
Thanks, Maria.
My name's Sam Liccardo. I live at 209 Renard Street, next door to the proposed substation. I have a question for the council, but firstly I would like to bring upon ARPANSA. ARPANSA is an Australian radiation protection regulatory body. They firmly state, on their website, that they say that they need a 5 to 10 metre minimum distance between substation and further properties. So my question is, why aren't council not liaising with PTV for an alternative location that will abide by our PANSA rules?
Thank you, Sam. Phil, would you like to take that question?
Thank you, Sam. As mentioned earlier, council has been liaising with PTV in relation to the questions of the safety of electromagnetic radiation. The CEO wrote in February, I believe it was, seeking advice, seeking expert reports. There's then been a further follow-up letter this week seeking that technical information that has also been emailed to residents who've approached council on the issue. Now, that letter from this week asks PTV to supply detailed specifications of the substation transformer, including likely output of electromagnetic radiation, detailed plans and design features to contain the likely EMF levels within formally recognised limits, concept drawings of the proposed substation, including details of the equipment, etc., and then goes further to request a report prepared by a suitably qualified practitioner that demonstrates that the substation will not result in dangerous levels of EMF to neighbouring dwellings. The report should detail the appropriate acts and regulations, so that would include the APANZA regulations for EMF, that guide EMF assessments and control measures. It also goes on to ask for the undertaking of EMF monitoring in and around nearby dwellings prior to the construction of the substation, and a commitment to commissioning further testing should the substation be progressed on the site.
Thank you. Can I just clarify as well about the piece of land that Councillor Yildiz proposed? Do we know if that's within 500 metres of the tram line? Because I know that's one of the prerequisites for the location.
No, it wouldn't be.
It wouldn't be.
It's got to be 500 metres. Sorry, does it have to be 500 metres?
Yes, it
Oh,
does.
that's probably just a bit over, I would think.
Thanks. Thank you, Sam. Like I said, Councillor Bolton, would you like to respond?
Question is really directed to the director. I know you said earlier that no planning permits required. What's the guideline? What's the point at which a planning permit would be required, or is there no planning permit required for any substation, or is it according to the size of substation and what equipment is in it? It would be good to have some clarity around that issue.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. There is a definition within the planning scheme that I believe I've circulated to councillors of a minor utility installation, and a minor utility installation would include a substation up to a certain size that would not require any planning permit. PTV have confirmed that the substation proposed for this site falls within that definition of the planning scheme.
Thank you, Phil. David, Oscar?
Can I just
Councillor
ask one
Yildiz?
last question? Sorry.
Sorry, David.
Phil, Shore Reserve, on the southern side of Shore Reserve, I mean, again, it's behind the neighbour's house, but there's a bit of block of land. If you look at Shore Reserve, it's not used. I mean, I know the park well. Football players rarely go behind the fence. You don't get residents or kids playing around there. I'm talking about it's right near Melville Road, near that corner of Reynard and Melville, but it's probably a bit south of that. I'm looking on the map, that's rarely used. I mean, how big are we talking in terms of the actual station itself? Can you just define that for me, please?
Could we take this conversation offline? I don't feel like it's appropriate. We've got a couple of minutes left and I have another question, and I don't want David to lose the chance to answer his question, but maybe if we could take these questions on notice, and I know that everyone's on a mailing list together and we can continue to work through other opportunities, other locations. It's not the first alternate location that's been proposed, and I'm not shutting down this being followed up outside of the chamber, but I think that we can't get the appropriate answer.
Okay, has anything been locked in? Has that site been locked in and has a decision been made?
We want this resident to be able to ask a question, so before question time runs out. Yeah. Oscar?
Let's do that.
Thanks, David.
G'day, my name's David Latino. Thanks for your time tonight. My question is previously when PTV wrote to local council and asked to locate the substation at the park, for better or for worse, the council at the time, the acting CEO at the time, wrote and indicated that it was not supportive of that site. It didn't say, well, we're not sure about the safety of it. We're not sure in terms of, look, we'd like to ask more questions. That was just rejected out of hand, notwithstanding also that there's already a substation at the at Shore Reserve there. But yeah, when it comes to a substation being proposed right next to a resident's house, right in a residential area, council's position is that it's going back to PTV asking questions. And my question to you is, following on from Councillor Tapanos, is why is it the council is not writing to PTV rejecting the proposal as to where it's locating its its substation and actually proposing that a piece of work, a proper piece of work, a consultative piece of work, get done to actually identify a suitable location. Everyone recognises that a substation needs to be built. That's not in question. Everyone recognises that it needs to be in a place that's safe. We all recognise that. So let's actually go through a proper consultative process to do it. But rather than ask questions about EMF and so on, let's actually stop this where it is at the moment and propose that a proper process be done, so we don't have this thing hanging over the residents' heads.
Thank you, David. I think Councillor Carbonell would like
The
to...
simple answer is because we don't have the authority to. If PTV...
Well, you had the authority, though, to write letters.
I'm sorry.
No, they don't need a planning permit. They don't need a permit from us. They can build it tomorrow if they want. It's about negotiation back and forth. They can build it tomorrow. On that site, if they want to do it, they can build it tomorrow if they want. They don't need any approval from council. It's not a matter of council saying, we don't stop it now. They're not asking for our approval.
It did. They asked for it when they tried to see it.
You're confusing two things. Yeah. You're confusing a site selection with approval for the actual substation. It's not requiring a permit from council for approval in any shape or form.
I understand, but PTV sought their advice and they didn't seek it.
Dialogue. I know that there are a lot of people that need to get more information, but I'm chairing a meeting and there is a process.
So my follow-up, I understand. My follow-up question is, how many substations are planned to be constructed within the City of Moreland? Given that there's three, given that there's 3 sites, how many substations are proposed to be built?
So we don't have that information in this room, but we can take that on notice and let you know. So we can refer back to you in writing to give you the information about how many substations.
Sorry, I believe the director wants to tell.
Right. Go for it.
Oh, we actually do have that.
We do have that. Okay.
So, thank you, David, for the question. One of the questions that was asked of PTV was, is this the only substation that is being proposed? Are there other sites that have been purchased for further substations, etc.? The advice that came back is this is the only substation within Moreland for Route 58 that is proposed.
But not for the other lines?
Sorry?
Not for the other tram lines that are in Moreland?
The question was not asked regarding other tram lines, but it was asked on the back of this particular case, and it was asked in relation to Route 58.
Let's recognise this is an issue not just for Moreland, not just for Renard Street, for everyone, because you just don't know where the next substation's got to be located.
Thank you. I've really got to draw a line under this. I think that the best opportunity to get a legitimate answer would have been getting the question on notice, because the question was about substations in the city, not for that line. And we still can take that question on notice, but at this stage we have been told that for the 58 line, no more substations will be built to service the E-class trams. That's the reason that they're being built. Renato, I'm sorry to say that I won't be able to take your question because we've already gone over time, but we can answer this question to you on notice. We can get you the answer on notice in writing. Yeah, sorry. But this issue is being addressed on the agenda, just because it came in late and we've gone over time. I'm sorry. Okay, so that concludes public question time, and I'll now move on to the council reports. So, on notice responses, councillors, just to note that on notice responses are now reported through the governance report, which comes later in the agenda, to be considered later this evening. So the first of the council reports is DCF 1919 Zero Carbon Moreland Action Plan 2021-2024-25, draft for adoption to consult. Do I have a mover for this report? Councillor Dorney, and the seconder? Councillor Carly Hannon. Councillor Dorney, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, I would. So the Zero Carbon Moreland Action Plan is being, if endorsed tonight, is being released for public consultation for the next 4 months. This is a huge flagship piece of work that sets out the actions for the Zero Carbon Framework, which was adopted back in October by councillors. It's looking at how we're going to decarbonise our community and bring the community along with us. Key in the areas of energy, transport and waste, namely. It's, as I said, going out for community consultation, so really implore the community to get involved. We're going to be consulting widely with the community and key stakeholders, and really excited to see what comes back and how we can build on the huge work that officers have done to date.
Thank you, Councillor Dorney. Councillor Carly, Hannon, would you like to speak as the second?
Oh, was am I right?
Yep. Any speakers against? So I'll put that to the vote, unless you really want to speak to it. Did you want to?
No, it's okay. It's all right.
So all those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. The next report we have to consider this evening is DCF 2019 Curbside Food Waste Collection Service Options, Council Action Plan D19 123875. Do I have a mover for this report? Councillor Martin and Councillor Dorney. Councillor Martin, would you like to speak to it?
Yes, briefly. Apologies, everyone. I'm a little bit under the weather at the moment. This is a fantastic step in Moreland's waste and litter strategy. What we set as a council coming on here is that we wanted to see zero waste to landfill by the year 2030. What a universal FOGO rollout will do will actually move us closer. It'll increase our diversion rate up towards the 60% target that we set in our 4-year waste and litter strategy. What it does and what this option C does is it explores the best practice universal FOGO rollout. It looks to the Metro Waste and Resource Recovery Group and what they have recommended as the best practice to roll out. What we're doing here is we're really wanting to engage and bring the community along with us. So what this will mean is that it will mean that residents who wish to get a green bin will be offered from July this year. They'll be able to have a free green bin. They'll be able to start putting their food and their garden organics in this bin from July this year. The current way that the bins are collected will continue for a full year while we roll out 1 year of solid education and community awareness on how to recycle your food and garden organics. What that means is we will be bringing the community along with us, and then we will move the whole city at once to a universal green bin system in March or April of 2021. So before I lose my voice, I strongly think my fellow councillors should support this moving forward.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Dorney?
Councillor Martin has covered it quite well. I think it's just worth mentioning the raft of work that has been completed up to this point of getting us to a hybrid model. It really acknowledges that we are needing to bring the community along to understanding how this works in order to have an effective FOGO system. And one way that we can do that is through this extensive engagement process, while also allowing people that are ready to move to put organics into their green bin, they can do so from July this year. So look forward to, hopefully we can get the Model C adopted tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Dorney. Any speakers against this motion? You busting to speak? Go for it.
For.
Yeah, go for it.
I want to commend council on this, and I want to congratulate the director, because this is something I've been wanting for years. I mean, the policy is great, but I'm excited about the fact that residents will get a free green bin, and I'd highly recommend residents not ring up council in the next few months and pay for it, because from the 1st of July, it'll be free, and it's a 120 litre bin, and we would really obviously encourage you to put your food scraps, which I'm sure some of you are already doing, but probably just wait till you get your green bin to start doing that from the 1st of July. But it was something I've honestly wanted for years, and I just think it's fantastic that this policy is being hopefully endorsed tonight. And it does, it encourages less items going to landfill and hopefully being recycled in the correct bin. But for the 1st of July, call up council, go through the process and get your free green bin.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Yule. There's Councillor Riley.
Yeah, just briefly, I just want to underline the reduce, which is the peak principle in what we're doing around this, reducing waste. And I urge all households to do that because many of you aren't doing a very good job. So this is actually going to help you do it. After you reduce, try and reuse it. So when you're doing your hard waste at the moment, you can reuse and share all your stuff on the street and reuse and recycle what everyone's doing. Because if you don't, a lot of it's going to go to landfill and you'll pay for it twice. Secondly, I'd also like to say, that's coming up next. So it is coming up in the agenda next.
No, this is now. This is FOGO.
Oh, we're doing FOGO.
You're ahead of yourself.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying
We're
this
doing
is
FOGO
helping
now.
in terms of
Yeah.
sharing
Right.
and reusing, Mayor. But I would like to reiterate that the free bin rollout from 1st of July is an excellent way of getting buy-in from the community because those people who haven't already bought in, because as Councillor Yildiz has ably said that you actually have to pay for them, this will actually engage those people who really want to start to reduce their waste and to get their food waste out of landfill if they can't actually compost at home. Secondly, it's going to actually, and as Councillor Martin said, we need to do a lot of education and information sharing around this. As the report points out, that young men from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds are the least educated, and we need to get them stepping up along with a whole lot of other people who are close to them. But we need to work on those blokes because they are ruining what we've got at the moment. We need to get a better outcome for us. This also supports the climate emergency platform and the zero carbon that we've just approved and that we're also looking at in terms of curbside report that's coming up. But I also just want to quickly add that in terms of reducing your waste, if you go for a smaller bin, you won't have to pay as much in your annual rates and so on in servicing your ongoing needs. So I would just put a plug in for that. If you already can reduce the amount of waste, I would suggest you do that because it's going to be helpful for your household's hip pocket.
I'd just like to add something to the conversation, which is that Councillors Riley, Dorney and I had a tour of the facility where the results of the FOGO trial were going. And I'd like to commend all of the people that were involved in the FOGO trial because...
Pascoe Vale and Pascoe Vale South.
Pascoe Vale, thank you. And Pascoe Vale South. Because what you've done, and some of you have been rewarded with medals and stuff on your bin, is you've actually set a precedent for this to be something that this city can come to terms with and we can adopt it. When we had the tour of the facility, we saw the bins were being audited and we could see what levels of contamination was happening. So we're going to have a big education piece and we're going to have to support each other about what stuff can go in the compost bin, in the green bin as food waste. And there's already been some conversations about, can you put cooked food in, which yes, you can, and some detail about that sort of thing. But also for all the old school composters like myself who have a couple of aero bins and a worm farm and various other tricks happening in the garden where food is rotting. If you're a purist and you refuse to put onions and citrus in your compost bin, you can now put them in your green waste bin with all your garden cuttings. So this is a great opportunity for anybody who's involved in making dirt anywhere at any stage. And I'm really proud to be part of this council that's adopting this particular policy, and I'd like to echo what Councillor Yildiz pointed out first on Monday, but just again now, that do not order a green bin now. From the 1st of July, you can get a green bin for free. It's part of what we're doing to encourage the take-up of this particular service, and we hope that if you have any questions, you'll approach us and get them answered. Are there any other councillors that would like to speak to this particular motion? Councillor Tapanos?
I will be brief because I think some very good speeches have been made already on this topic and most of the issues have already been canvassed. But just to emphasise again that this is us increasing as a council recycling within the municipality and enabling this option now of food waste being able to be recycled through the green bin. So that is a message that we want to get out there into the community quite strongly, but you can now do that as of 1 July. And also I'm very pleased that we are not charging for the green bins. It is a cost that I guess we're going to take on well, we're going to have to discuss and find the money during the budget discussion, but it's a cost that we would like to absorb at the council and provide that extra service to the community. And I think that's quite important because recycling is a journey we all need to go on, and it's important that we are assisting the community and encouraging the community. So we're not making recycling of green waste a burden on anyone. So it is important we provide the bins for free. So I think we're on the right track. I think we're going to have a long way to go to get the message out there and make sure that our community does the right thing, and that is recycling their food waste, but don't contaminate the green bin with other waste. That's a very important message. And if this is very successful, I think you would find that it's not only environmentally friendly, it will help to really decrease the amount of stuff that goes to landfill, and that's so important.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And I'd like that to be recorded as unanimous, please. Declare it carried unanimously. Thank you. So we'll move on to DCF 2119, Proposed Plastic Wires Policy, Council Action Plan D19110357. I have a mover for this report. Oh, Councillor Martin.
I'd like to move some amendments to this policy as circulated to councillors from officers. And I'd prefer not to go through them all.
You don't have to.
Hang in there.
As listed.
So I'll take Councillor Dorney as seconding Councillor Martin's motion with the amendments which she's happy with. So Councillor Martin, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, I'll just wait for the amendments to come up for those in the gallery. So while officers get that, so it's the amendments that have been circulated from Phil on the table.
Through the chair.
Oh.
I'm happy to.
Okay, so we just have to confirm that.
I'm confirming that I'm moving all of the amendments. All of the amendments as listed in that table.
Okay, so we'll leave things as they are. We just had to clarify for the gallery and everyone at home. We just had to clarify there was quite a list of amendments, and some of them were put forward by Councillor Dorney initially, but Councillor Martin has adopted those as his own to put forward as amendments, and Councillor Dorney is seconding the motion. Go for it.
Thank you. So what we are doing here at Moreland is we are joining many, many other councils who have taken steps to curb the problem that is plastic litter and plastic pollution. We saw only a few weeks ago the State of the Environment and the State of the Yarra reports released by the Commissioner for Environmental Sustainability. They showed deteriorations and that the environment is under significant stress when it comes to litter entering our creeks, via our drains, entering our rivers and then entering the bay. We've had federal government inquiries, we've had significant amount of research, of academics, of people telling us that this is a problem that needs greater action. You have continents like the EU who have moved to ban single-use plastic in many capacities. You've got councils like the City of Hobart, where they've gone even further to ban single-use plastics in their city. We've even had some fantastic feedback from residents, from groups in the community, and even the Merri Creek Management Committee sent through to us the results of some recent audits that they conducted on the creek, stating that the overwhelming amount of litter collected across the creek, or at both sites, was made up of plastics. So these are plastics from people in our municipality and going into our creeks. What we are doing here today is we're saying that under council remit, and that is festivals and events primarily, and then looking at council facilities, and then council leased facilities and venues. What we're saying is we want to limit the amount of single-use plastic at those events, and we want to help stimulate the market and find alternatives for those items going forward. And so we're not the first to do this, and I really do thank the officers and the other councillors for working through a lot of these amendments that I've put forward. We are joining a number of other councils, which was really first led by the Surf Coast Shire down in Torquay, that really were the trailblazers in this space. And we are doing our role in governance under what jurisdiction and remit that we have as a council in the absence of state and federal action. So I do encourage my fellow councillors to support this policy, to support these amendments, and to allow us to become plastic wise.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Dorney?
Yeah, just briefly, I think Councillor Martin has covered a lot of the points and leadership and reasoning for why council, this is definitely in the remit of council and in public health, addressing public health and maintaining our environment. I think the litter that we see in beaches, in rivers, in creeks, largely comes from municipalities such as Moreland and enters via our stormwater drains. We know from what Martin, Councillor Martin, not Dr. Martin, Councillor Martin has said, the Merri Creek Management Committee, you know, they're often out collecting litter, the community's often out, and they know predominantly it's single-use plastic that they're seeing. We have a real ability, we're in a plastic age, it's not good and it doesn't need to be the way. We had a society that functioned perfectly well before convenience of single-use plastic existed. I recognise that plastic has a place in society, but this throwaway, use it and then it's gone and then it's in our river systems, in our creeks and in our beaches just isn't okay. It goes beyond aesthetic. We're actually, may I say it, the research has come out that we're now seeing it in human fecal matter. We're discovering plastic is actually going through our bodies and is the microplastics. It's a really big deal. So I'm excited that we're doing what we can from an events and council facilities perspective in bringing our community along to show alternatives and really be leaders in this space. Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Dorney. Are there any councillors I'll just check, are there any councillors who'd like to speak against the motion?
The amendment's been put into the standard motion, is that right?
Yes.
Can we vote on them separately?
Yeah, can we vote separately on it?
Is there an issue on voting on the 20?
No issue at all going on by one.
Yeah.
In fact, it's probably needed.
Okay, so I'll just check in with everyone. I suspect that councillors would like to split up the different points and vote on them independently. And I think did you want to put the question first, Councillor O'Farnley?
Am I just able to ask a question of the director?
Of course.
That's all right.
Yep, absolutely.
Is it Director Joseph or
Priest.
Mr. Priest? Just a clarification on the fourth point in the table that was distributed. Just wanted to get my head around what impact the alternative will have on sporting clubs. I'm just a little bit confused in terms of what's being proposed, and so I could just better understand that. Yep. Can you just take us through exactly what's being proposed and what the amendment is and what impact that will have?
Yeah.
Thank you, through the chair. So the proposed amendment is to provide for an encouragement for clubs to be encouraged to provide other options than purchase of bottled water or bottled soft drink, etc., by providing reusable containers, reusable drinking water bottles, etc., and access to other forms of drinking water than buying bottled water.
So just to clarify, it's not suggesting to stop sporting clubs from being able to sell bottled water or bottled Gatorade or Coke. It's to encourage them to have, in addition to that, reusable, recyclable water and the like drinking
Exactly.
fountains.
Yes, it's an encouragement not to use
That's what
bottled
this
water. It's an
amendment is
encouragement
asking for.
and an ability to provide alternatives to bottled water.
Gotcha.
Or other forms of single-use plastic.
Okay.
All right, so I think what we'll probably do is start with number 1, parts A and B.
Can I suggest a path forward?
Yes.
I'm quite comfortable with all the amendments. If there's a particular amendment that people want to vote separately,
Pull out.
maybe they should pull
that
those
is a
out.
good suggestion. So can I just get an indication of which amendments councillors would like to vote on independently of the rest of the substantive motion?
I wasn't able to find it on the phone. I was looking. There was one there that the advice from the director was a month ago that it was impractical.
Yeah. So I can just answer that one. So the amendments that were circulated a month ago have been toned back quite substantially in this second set. So the amendments that was rendered last month are different to these set of amendments.
I'm sorry, I wasn't aware of that. I'm comfortable with supporting them then. Okay, thank you.
Are there any other councillors that would like any of the amendments pulled out of the substantive motion? Anna Olivia?
comfortable with
Councillor
the
Colley-Hannon?
new
Sorry
ones.
about that. Okay, so it looks like we can, hang on a sec. Looks like we can vote on the whole thing as a block, and I needed to ask for a councillor against. Does anybody want to speak against it? Because we had 2 speakers for. And then if you're busting to speak, I've got councillor Tapanos and then councillor Rice.
No, I was going to request that maybe the sporting one be considered, but it looks like maybe there isn't the support in the chamber. And the reason why I do that is because I do think that this policy now has had some considerable consultation with our sporting clubs. So to add that amendment at the last minute, I think is slightly unfair. This is a very important area. There would be numerous council reports in the future around single-use plastics within the municipality. I think if we were to go a bit slower and bring everyone with us and not put amendments in at the last minute, it might be a better way to proceed.
Sure.
So I certainly wouldn't want to see any clubs find difficulty because they can't source an alternative supplier and be told you're not complying with council policy. I think the greater good, which we want to achieve here, is to bring community and sporting organisations in particular with us and not create more angst and get them against the policy as a whole. So I do have some concerns about that one. I do see that the compromise is probably one that is workable, but nonetheless, I think that it would be wise for sporting clubs to have an opportunity to respond to the wording that's been proposed here. So I do feel a little bit uncomfortable about this one, but I fully endorse and support the broader strategy, and it is something that we need to take a leading role on. I do see sometimes it comes across my Facebook feed, videos of wildlife in our creeks and in our oceans in particular, choking on plastic. So this is a global problem that we need to take serious, and all action, global action, starts locally, and I'm proud to be on a council that is taking this serious, but I just want to make sure we're bringing everyone with us, because only then will this strategy actually achieve the desired result. And if sporting clubs have not seen this, have not been consulted, then I don't want to support it.
Thanks, councillor Tapanos. So I've just got something from the CEO.
So this is, just through the Mayor, this is a little bit administrative, but it's just to make sure it's really clear.
Yep.
So the table that was circulated had all the amendments, which came from a number of people, which were incorporated in a sort of motion from councillor Martin. One thing that you may notice in the table is that there are 2 rows from 2 different councillors that are quite similar. We would be proposing that the first row, so row 1, I think that is Phil, which was from you, councillor Abood, would not be in that motion. Otherwise, you've actually got 2 points that are quite similar to each other in that table. So just because they've been moved as a big block,
I'm happy for.
we just want to clarify that so that we can.
Yeah, I'm happy for point 4 because it's talking about the encouragement to take that point 1. So yeah, sorry for that confusion.
Great.
And I've got a slight amendment as well.
So,
Yep. I'll get to everyone. Hang on a sec. So can I just double check if councillors want to pull out the amendment that talks to the sporting clubs?
Yes.
Because I feel like there's quite a few people that would like to do that. So I think what's probably a good course of action is we vote on that particular amendment and then we continue on. Well, I think Councillor Bolton has an amendment to put forward as well. And then we vote on the substantive, speak to and vote on the substantive once we've worked out what it is.
So,
Yep.
just through the mayor. So we just need to do this in the right way.
Yep.
So sorry about this. If you would like to do that, then you would debate the additional, or the point that you want to actually debate by itself.
Yep.
And you would move it as an additional point. So you'd probably need another councillor separate to the councillors who moved and seconded to vote for its inclusion. And then you have the debate about its inclusion.
Okay, sure.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
And then if it's included, then you do the whole thing, the substantive motion, and then we move forward.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, I'm happy to put it as an additional point to, so we have the substantive motion with that particular motion out again, and then what we're doing is putting amendments, so I'm happy to put that amendment, which was number 4, was it? Yep, so which is number 4, and I'll speak to it. Oh, do I need a seconder? Oh, it's acceptable to the mover and seconder,
No,
so
I
I
think
don't.
we're not doing that.
No, so this is the
But,
problem.
because
So-
I'm not having
correct.
it, yeah, okay,
Yeah,
it's not
so,
being,
so you'll need another
Yeah.
seconder.
Yeah.
And then you'll have the debate on its inclusion.
yep.
And
I
then
get it.
if it's included, it's in the substantive motion, and then you go ahead.
So councillor Riley is going to second the proposed amendment that's been taken out of the group of initial amendments, which were incorporated.
I'm happy to talk to you.
So I just want to make sure they're clear.
Yes? Okay, right.
We're
And,
all on the same page.
and as the mover of that amendment, I'll speak to it, and then I suspect councillor Riley will speak to it as well. Now, I understand the contention around this particular issue, but what I've noticed since I've been a councillor, because I wasn't really involved in sporting clubs that closely in the past, is that sporting clubs are the first place where you can change culture. And they're resilient and they're versatile and they're flexible and they don't mind change and they don't mind taking stuff on and they watch what's happening. And there are lots of women involved and women are great at this stuff. Sporting clubs have lots of women involved, even if it doesn't look like that. And I'm quite confident that the sporting clubs will be able to handle this particular amendment. But also, I think that considering what we're talking about are predominantly going to be plastic bottles in this context, and we have a serious problem with the way we deal with single-use plastic bottles in this country and the world, which is that all of the recycling systems are completely broken. We don't have a container deposit scheme in this state. I think that what we need to do is focus on reduction. And I think that part of what this might achieve, if we can support the sporting clubs to adopt this new scenario, is it might help to encourage reduction, which will help to resolve the issue that we have with single-use plastics and in this case bottles specifically. So that's why I'm putting this amendment, and I'm not too jumpy about the fact that the sporting clubs will be able to handle the change.
Thank you. Just to be clear, this amendment allows sporting clubs, aquatic and leisure centres to continue to sell and distribute drinks in single-use plastic bottles. So I don't understand why there's a concern about this, because they'll be able to continue doing what they're doing. What it does say is, and it strengthens the fact that we are going to have stakeholder engagement about the continuance of that and what implications that might have into the future for people's use of our facilities, council facilities. So there's going to be a conversation and a discussion. I would have thought under our engagement and consultation strategies, this would fit and make a whole lot of sense. Finally, it does encourage use of access to drinking water and bubblers and so on. So it seems to cover off on all of the options and all of the things that are probably happening already. But what we're actually indicating quite strongly to our sporting clubs and centres is that we want to have this discussion because we want to reduce the reliance on it. So it seems to me like this is a better proposal than the original. And I just would like to finish saying in terms of the substantive, so I don't have to stand up again, I hope, just to say that what we're trying to do here is actually support all those people who get out on a weekly or annual basis to get around and pick up the rubbish. I was going to use another word by a different letter, but pick up all the stuff that gets left on our streets and in our waterways. And I have to say, they do that in vain. Clean Up Australia Day, it's all in vain because the next week or two, it's all back. So if I'm surprised that anyone would want to continue to encourage to have our volunteers, residents and community have to get out on a regular basis, because I'm a bit sick of doing it. I've done it on a number of occasions and I see it all in vain, and I'd like to actually do what I can as a councillor to try and address that, and I want to invite the clubs into that discussion so we can have better use and reduction of single-use plastics. That's my thought.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Tapanos, do you feel like you've already spoken against this motion?
No, I'd like to make a couple of comments,
Sure.
but I'm happy to wait.
Yeah, well, I need a speaker against this amendment. Sorry, not motion, the amendment.
As well. I do think that if you have a look at the amendment and the message and how the clubs will perceive the message, is that, yes, there will be some consultation, but certainly this is a direction that the council wants to go through, and this will be embedded after the consultation, of course, will be embedded in their leases, licences and contracts. And I just feel that if you really have a look at the nature of the sporting clubs and the drinks that they do sell, this is a broader issue. This is a state and a national issue. It's difficult to say to an outlet that a canteen that operates out of a sporting club, you can't sell bottled water, you can't sell bottled soft drink. It's really difficult to make that implementation. This kind of strategy and policy really needs to be directed by state and national bodies with the corporations that produce those products, to be able to say to a canteen, because it operates out of a council venue, that in the future you will be breaching your contract if you sell soft drink in a plastic bottle. I just feel uncomfortable. I think that we are particularly penalising our local people as opposed to tackling this issue through the supply of those bottles, which is really what's going to produce the result. Now, I know that this motion doesn't ban them right away. I know it allows them to do that, and it begins a conversation about banning them in the future. But I really still don't think that that is the way we should be framing this conversation, and I don't think the way we should be pursuing this policy change is by making it difficult for our canteens in our sporting clubs. I think really this is an advocacy, and we should be tackling it at the point of distribution. We should be tackling it at the point of manufacture, and that is working with soft drink companies, working with bottled water companies and all the other drinks that come in single-use plastics, and working with state and federal government to support them to get out of that industry and to provide alternatives at that level. Not to say that our club here in Brunswick or Pascoe Vale or Fawkner is going to be penalised, and you go across the creek on either side and it's a different policy. I really don't see that achieving anything apart from aggravating the community and aggravating people, when really this policy should be broadly adopted. So I think it's got a counter what we're trying to achieve.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. 4?
Against.
4? Thank you, Councillor Martin. You can go next, Councillor Yildiz.
Thank you. So originally we proposed that we would go a little bit harder, and we would say to sporting clubs, this is what we want to do. We want to phase out single-use plastics at all of our venues. What this motion here in front of us is saying is that you can keep doing that. We're going to have a conversation with you and say, hey, maybe instead of selling water bottles in the future, you would consider providing free water to people. Now, I know from a health perspective, we're talking about trying to get our kids off soft drink. And at some facilities, you may only be able to purchase soft drink. And so by us saying to clubs, you have to provide free drinking water to children as opposed to potentially soft drink, which is in plastic bottles, I think is a much better health outcome for our community. And it's something that we should definitely encourage and have the conversation on going forward. I think what we're also saying is that you need to promote it. You need to promote drinking water as a healthy option. And we're not saying to clubs, you can't do this. We're starting the conversation with them. That's what we're doing. And we could go to the manufacturers, and I know how successful many, many environmentalists have been going to the manufacturers and asking for a container deposit scheme in Victoria. You could go to the state government and ask for a container deposit scheme, and it's probably the same response that you'll get from the manufacturers, because they're in quite a similar line of thought in that sense. But at the end of the day, what we're saying is that drinking water out of a tap is a better health outcome than drinking soft drink. And also another additional benefit in that is that the plastic bottle that gets used for only a few minutes doesn't end up in our waterways and out in our ocean with hundreds of thousands, if not billions of tons of plastic contaminating our waterways, which then breaks down into microplastics. It attracts heavy metals, toxins, bioaccumulates, re-enters the food chain, and then comes back on our plates as humans. And I really think that, future generations will judge us, but the problem of plastic litter and plastic waste needs to be addressed. It needs to be addressed at a local level, at a state level, at a federal level, and at a global level. What we are doing here is what powers that we have as a council. And like I said before, we are not the first. We are one of many that is taking very, very similar action in starting those conversations which need to be had.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Yildiz.
Okay.
Offer an amendment to this.
I don't know, but when you go to the MCG or Amy Park, or you go to Marvel Stadium, or even Icon Park at Carlton, and you go and order a beer, they give it to you in a plastic cup, right? You want to ban pretty much. You're not saying you want to ban a plastic cup, but at a macro level, you can still go to these venues and purchase Powerade. You can purchase Gatorade, but at a local club, this will destroy some clubs. If you did it at one of our council-owned facilities, for example, at a leisure centre, it's probably more acceptable, I'd say.
It doesn't say not to.
Huh?
It doesn't say they can't. Just want to clarify that are permitted
Yeah, but
to sell.
it's saying we're having the discussion around that,
Okay,
and
just clarify.
I'm guessing that it's going to. If we're going to ban selling water bottles, we're going to dictate that. We're saying serve water out of a tap. We need to be providing that service as a council because they're our facilities. If I'm reading into this, Dale, it's saying that Councillor Martin. It's saying that you're pretty much wanting to encourage clubs not to serve anything out of bottles, but you'd like them to serve it out of cups. I don't think that's going to be realistic. I think there's got to be more thought put into this, and there's got to be more discussion with clubs, in particular those clubs who maybe just serve water. But to change that, I know it's not going to be a policy set. It's an amendment to. And it's not necessarily going to happen tomorrow. But even to suggest this, I think we've got to give it more thought. I think there's got to be more discussion with the director for social development and his team to see if there'd be any buy-in. But whether it's water or not, I think this is going to be you're going to have a fight on your hands, and I won't be supporting it.
Thank you.
Even the discussion of it, I think it's ridiculous. Anyway.
I agree with that bit. Thank you, Councillor Yildiz.
Like an amendment, or do you want to take it through?
They've got to deal with this first.
This is an amendment to the amendment.
No, you've got to deal with this first, and then you can amend it again.
Don't start that again. Hang on, what's going on?
No, it's an amendment. Well, it might make it acceptable to people.
That's true. That's true. Propose it.
Could I just hang on a second?
Okay, so amendments need to be considered one at a time.
She wants to make an amendment
to the amendment. So that would
put forward
only,
your amendment
so
to
that
the
would only
amendment,
work if
Councillor
the
Bolton.
person who's moved the
As the
amendment
mover,
accepts your words. Otherwise, it's, yeah.
Put forward your amendment to the
This
amendment.
may or may not help, but anyway, my proposal is at the end of the amendment 1A, the end of that, the final sentence of that, that we add something saying, in addition, council will audit the availability of bubblers at council-owned venues such as sporting clubs and aquatic centres, and where there are gaps, plan to install them. I mean, possibly there could be other infrastructure to assist the clubs as well. I don't know if that would help assist. It's.
Can you restate it
I mean,
for the typing? So
sorry, I thought it went through.
Thank you, I appreciate what you're trying to do, and it's not acceptable because I don't think it changes the intention of, there is water in those places.
Yeah.
I understand what you're.
It's also, as part of the strategy, it mentions exactly what you're talking about here.
So I think
Just want to speak against.
I think we've just had against. Are there any councillors that would like to speak in support of this amendment?
Dale's amendment.
The amendment that
On the screen.
is on the screen, which is about the sporting clubs, which I put and Mark seconded.
But currently the other one's being added in, so that hasn't been accepted though.
No, the bubblers bit is unacceptable. Yeah, it hasn't been.
So I'll just withdraw that.
Thank you, councillor Bolton. So we need a speaker in support of amendment to amendment one, sorry, which was put by me and regards the sporting clubs. Councillor Davidson.
I'm going to rise to speak in support of the amendment. And I think that it's almost alarmist to say that it will destroy clubs. It doesn't go that far at all. It's a watered-down version, excuse the pun, of what was previously proposed. I think if we look at the wording quite closely, it's self-evident. And the logic is stark and the need is great. It doesn't just go to the environment, it goes to children's health, adults' health as well. We're saying to people, have an alternative, have a drinking fountain available for people when they participate in sporting activities. It's not hard, it's so easy. I don't understand how this is something that is going to destroy clubs when we've had such great consultation. We've got a few little levers here that we're pulling. One of the biggest levers that council had that I saw remarkable results with was when we encouraged women to participate in sporting activities. This is almost something such a smaller level than that, but it was something that achieved such a great result. So I encourage my fellow councillors not to have this hesitation, to embrace this and to feel confident that we're doing something that is on a smaller level, as the Women in Sport policy had such a big result. And this is the start of something big.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. I think I'm just going to put this to the vote. I think we've heard Councillor Farnley, would you like to speak in favour of this, against this amendment?
Yeah, and I think Councillor Carly-Hannan wanted to speak to it too.
Against it?
Yeah.
Right.
But do you want me to go
So
first?
I think I saw her first, actually. So if we're going to keep going, I'll ask Councillor Carly-Hannan to put her case forward.
I'll be brief. Okay, so I'm only rising to speak against for the part that says are permitted to sell or distribute drinks in single-use plastic bags until stakeholder engagement regarding integration of the policy with relevant leases, license and contract. The reason being, not that I don't think we should have the conversation and that we should be encouraging the infrastructure and the clubs to be providing the water, which I think they really already do. And, you know, they are providing keep cups and reusable bottles and all kinds of things as well. But I do think that the purpose of this motion is to then prevent licences and contracts on the grounds of people having plastic cups, and as we know, or plastic bottles, and as we know for the bottles of all of our sporting clubs, they do need to still be able to sell these, and our community still buys these products. And while we should be reducing plastic, I think that it's too much of a stick approach and we should be focusing on the carrot. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carly-Hannan. Councillor Farnley, would you like to speak against?
Was a speaker in favour?
Oh, sorry, a speaker in favour, please. Thank you, Councillor Bolton.
I'll speak in favour.
So much passion.
I recognise there are going to be some difficulties with this, but I'm going to speak in favour. I mean, I think there are going to be some difficulties for sporting clubs, but I do feel that we do need to move in this direction. I guess the critical thing for me is for council to provide enough support, sufficient support for sporting clubs with this transition. And when we get to the substantive motion, I want to move that we do a review of the progress of the policy within 12 months. Because I think we need to see how it's going and we need to give assistance. And also in the second part, with single organisations that might be having a single hire of a town hall, for example, that for those groups it's probably going to be even harder than sporting clubs, which have some infrastructure. So, I mean, I guess from my point of view, I'm mostly interested in the assistance council provides to assist sporting clubs and so forth, but also organisations hiring town halls to be able to comply with this policy, including what sort of alternatives, practical alternatives, organisations can use, and also making sure that the facilities are available at the sporting clubs, i.e. bubblers, or, you know, water fountains, as Queenslanders call them. That's my concern. But I do think we need to move in this direction. So I think we do need to adopt this, but, you know, with plenty of support.
Thanks, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Afani.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I've listened to the debate, which has been great and constructive. I've also had some further advice from council staff in regards to the amendment and what impact it has. I just wanted to clarify exactly why I'm against this, and hopefully councillors can hear my perspective on this. Firstly, the existing policy that council officers are putting forward for us actually says in the policy that in regards to sporting clubs, they must promote and consider using and supplying and selling reusable options. So that is actually included in the policy, and I'm very supportive of that we are asking our sporting clubs to consider using reusable options. So I'll be supporting the council officer's recommendation. What I won't be supporting is the amendment, which talks about must provide it, and if not, what it could lead to is taking a look at people's sporting clubs' leases, licences and contracts. I don't believe in the approach that potentially down the track a council officer has the ability to hold a sporting club's licence or lease over their head if they're not compliant with this approach. That to me is the concern. When it comes to policy regarding sporting clubs, I'm quite conservative. I don't believe that we should be jumping too far forward. The policy talks already about encouraging sporting clubs to use reusable options. I support that. That's what I will be supporting, the council officer's recommendation, but not this amendment. Not the amendment which talks about holding organisations' licences and leases over their head if they don't comply. I don't support that approach.
Thanks, Councillor O'Farnley. Is there anyone who would like to, anyone else who would like to speak to it, or do you think we can put it to the vote?
The amendment.
Great, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour of the amendment to the substantive motion? Against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I declare that carried. Of course. Of course. So, all those in favour? Councillor Bolton, Davidson, Dorney, Riley, Abood and Martin. Bolton, Dorney, Abood, Riley and Martin. And Councillor Riley. And against? Councillors Carly Hannon, O'Farnley, Kavanagh, in no particular order, Martin, Tapanos, oh sorry, not Martin, Tapanos and Tapanos.
Oh, they've missed me on it.
Yeah,
missed
yep, that's
Councillor
okay,
Davidson.
yep, got it. And Councillor Davidson was in favour. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Thank you, everyone. We now have a substantive motion to speak to. I believe that Councillor Martin has spoken.
I've got my amendment. I'd like to
Oh, no, we don't have a substantive motion quite yet. Okay, so councillor Bolton, would you like to propose your amendment?
I'd just like to add a point at the end that we review the implementation of this policy within 12 months.
Sure.
Or the progress of
So I just want to highlight that it's actually in there. The report comes back by June 2020 that has the summary. It also has details of the engagement and consultation in it. So I don't know if that's acceptable.
I'd like to see it in the actual motion rather than
Yeah, so
buried
it's just
in the report.
number 2 there on the screen.
Not on. It's not on the papers.
Yep, so one of your amendments, is it?
Yes, yeah.
So,
it's just-
can I just say through you?
Yes, please.
So just through the Mayor, councillor Bolton. So councillor Bolton, it's not in the papers because this is one of the amendments that was moved as part of the substantive motion.
Okay, so any other amendments to the substantive motion? All right, we have a substantive motion to debate. I've heard from councillor Martin, but I've no idea if I heard from councillor Dorney as the second. And yeah, I did. Okay, are there any councillors who would like to speak against the motion? And so any other councillors who feel passionately like they'd like to speak in favour of the motion, which is to adopt the plastic wise policy with the amendments? And I'd like to say something. So the plastic wise policy for me is a game changer, and I'm really keen to support it because when I was a teenager, everything I owned was plastic, but none of what I really ate out of was plastic. And we still did our dishes back then. But I know that I had plastic shoes, I had plastic earrings, I had plastic everything, and it's all out there still. I got no idea where, probably out in the Pacific Rim, or hopefully being made into Adidas runners or something, I don't know. But it's been in the ocean for a while. But the ocean is not the thing that I want to focus on to convince everybody that this is a good idea. What I want to focus on is the fact that we have a waste crisis. Okay, so we have a waste crisis where for years we've been asking other nations, initially I thought it was just China, but it goes far further than that, to make single-use plastic items for us, which we use once and then throw back at them and then get all out of shape when they don't want to keep taking that stuff on board to dispose of for us after we got them to make it for us and used it once, which is just incredibly rude and kind of stupid too. So I think that we have the capacity to learn how to do this. Ultimately, it's the old way. But if we don't do it, what's going to happen is the landfills will fill up. And when the landfills fill up, people are going to start putting forward this innovative new idea that you've been hearing, which is called waste to energy. And I don't have a lot of comfort or faith in the idea of waste to energy, but I do feel like I can see that the landfills are going to fill up pretty soon. And that's going to give people a license to start asking for contracts to take that waste. And those contracts are going to be able to enable those people to get the finance they need to create these waste to energy projects. Now, we're not ahead of the game on anything really much in this country. I mean, maybe there's something, could be women in sport, I don't know what it is, but it's definitely not waste. And we don't know how to burn our rubbish because we don't know what to do with the ash from the rubbish. So we're getting there. We know what to do with the smoke maybe and the steam that's produced, but I'm not convinced that we know how to deal with this, and it's coming like a freight train, and we need to stop using single-use plastics. So I feel like council has the purview of rates, roads and rubbish. This is waste, which is rubbish, and we need to do what we can, where we can, to start addressing it. I think the FOGO was a good part, and I think that encouraging, like happens in many other places, the phasing out of single-use plastics where it's within our control is a brilliant idea, and I'm really proud to support it. That's it, I'm done, full stop. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to the motion? Then I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour of adopting the proposed plastic-wise policy, council action plan, in favour? Against? I'd like that recorded as unanimous, please. Thank you. All right, let's move on.
Is it possible to move a couple of items up the agenda?
What would you like to hear, Nick?
item 2219 on John Street and 2519 on the traffic management east of Nicholson.
And Newlands traffic. as
Yeah,
well.
okay, look, I'm just going to keep going because I don't imagine that will happen again, and it's literally the next item after this one. So DCI 1219, if there was one, maybe I could have moved it forward, but there was 3 proposed to move forward, so they'll all end up in the same place. DCI 1219, the impact of the second hard rubbish collection on customer request numbers relating to dumped rubbish numbers. Council action plan item.
Chair, I've got a conflict of interest on this one.
Thank you very much.
Through work.
Thank you. We'll come and get you, Ali. Hopefully it won't be long.
Okay.
Can't make any promises. Do I have a Councillor Martin and a seconder?
I'd just like to move a slight amendment.
Yep. Could you tell us what that is?
Yeah, so it's adding a second dot point to the officer recommendation, which currently is just notes the report.
Yep.
Is to receive a further report. I'm going to insert the word 6 months before the expiry of the current hard waste collection.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. That's been circulated prior to this and was discussed at the briefing on Monday, I believe. So I'm sure everyone knows what we're dealing with. Do I have a seconder for this motion? Councillor Riley's happy to second. Okay, Councillor Martin, go for your last.
Thank you. I'll be brief. So essentially, council offers 2 hard waste collections a year. It was something that was brought in quite early on in our council term. What was really a concern of mine when the second hard rubbish collection was brought in is that, in my mind, moving to a zero waste local government area, we don't want to encourage people to continually just dump and throw out things. We want people to encourage reuse. One of the things we did was that we amended the local laws to make it legal to go and go through people's hard rubbish and take that and take that home or reuse it in any way that you want. And that was a great win for the community. And I've seen many Facebook groups go up now where people are actually going around collecting some of the hard rubbish before it gets chomped up in the back of a truck. What I'm really concerned about is the fact that a second hard rubbish collection hasn't really had any impact on the amount of dumped rubbish in our city. And for me, that is my primary concern, and that is my primary driver as to why we should be having a second hard rubbish collection. And so I do have some concerns in the sense that, we are spending close to $700,000 for this second collection and the additional CRS or customer requests. And I would like to receive a report back that further details these metrics that we've been receiving and that we've seen in this report, but then also highlights to us whether or not dumped rubbish is decreasing in our city, because we need to get it right. We need to work out how to reduce the amount of dumped rubbish in our city. And if we're spending an additional $700,000 and it's not having an impact on that, I think we should have a conversation about, could we spend the $700,000 better in a way to reduce the amount of dumped rubbish? So I'm looking forward to receiving the report 6 months before the expiry of the contract. And I'm also looking forward to continuing to measure those metrics to see if the hard rubbish collections are having an impact on that waste.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Riley, would you like to speak to the motion? I'd just like to add very quickly that, thank you, Councillor Panos, that it is perfectly legal now within our local laws, which were amended, to help yourselves to people's hard rubbish. And there's a bunch of stuff lying everywhere. And so while there are those Facebook groups that advertise what's laying around, I just wanted to reiterate that it's perfectly legal to take whatever you like from the street. Councillor Tapanos?
Yes, and in doing so, please try not to make too much of a mess. I noticed walking around that people scavenging for other people's hard waste has really resulted in a lot of people just making it like putting the rubbish everywhere. So please don't do that. But look, having said that, those last comments, which I do agree with, I mean, whether it was legal or not, it's a practice that's always been happening. Whilst we have a curbside collection, people do go, reuse and recycle, and that is a good thing. So just to note that, yes, it's legal now, but it was always happening, and that's not a bad thing. And I don't think we ever policed it, even when it wasn't legal to do so. But I'm supporting this motion and really pleased to see the report and some of the statistics. But I do have some contrary comments to Councillor Martin. Our community is growing, particularly in the south, in my ward, in the South Ward of Brunswick. We're seeing most of that growth coming in apartments which have residents that are transient. And this is a change of our community, and we should take that into account when we're looking at the service of the community. So although compared to a few years ago, or say 2014, we are seeing more dumped rubbish today, that is because we have an increased population, and we have an increased population that lives in apartments, and we have an increased transient population. So I disagree with the view that this isn't working. I would say that it is working, but we are still seeing the problem. And what we need to do is provide more of a service to our community, not less. So I come from a view of how do we decrease dumped rubbish and how to provide a service to the community. And I would say the second collection is still significant. So I noticed when we had one, we collected approximately 2,957 tonnes. When we had two, we collected in the first one 2,770 tonnes, and in the second one we collected 2,103 tonnes. Overall, it is more waste. It is reflective of a growing community that is transient, and it is a service that we should provide. What I would like to see in the additional dot point report that comes back is how best can we provide the service. And I mentioned here now that perhaps one of the ways that we could provide the service is to provide one curb and channel collection, which is what we have now, and provide one voucher collection where at any point during the year, if you are moving from your apartment, for example, you can call the council and have them come and collect your waste. I think this alternate sort of way of providing the collection would decrease dump rubbish. I think it's certainly worth trialling, and I think that should be something that we discussed when the report comes back. But certainly we should not go down the path of not providing the service because we don't want rubbish to go to landfill. We should go down the path of providing more of a service and supporting our community, but whilst doing that, also encouraging recycling.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Are there any other councillors that would like to speak to this motion? What? Thank you, good idea. Let's vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. We might get Councillor Farnley back in the room, please. And move on to DCD 719, Access and Inclusion category of the Moreland Community Awards. I need a mover for that motion. Councillor Riley's on his feet. Thank you, Councillor Davidson.
Thank you. So just speak briefly to this. This is a motion to expand our Moreland Community Awards to acknowledge disability access and inclusion, and those people who are active and in this space and speaking up and providing voices for these issues throughout our city. This has come through some of our advisory group work, our disability advisory group, and it's an opportunity for us to acknowledge that, but also acknowledge the diversity that we have in our community and the huge, and how we value that as a city. So I'm really excited by the prospect of this work, and it's also about trying to ensure that it really does represent the people for whom this access and inclusion sort of category is affecting. So it might also include people who are ably bodied or indifferent to that, but I think what our intention is to really make sure that we focus those people who are actually affected and living with those issues. So I'm really excited by the fact and commend all the people who've been involved in bringing it to us.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Davidson, would you like to speak? Nothing further to add. Anyone like to add anything? Councillor Bolton?
I actually do think this is a good thing for us to do. I guess my concern is in terms of access and inclusion, what I've become very aware of from being part of the Moreland Disability Advisory Committee just this year, is the range of disabilities and range of access issues, including people with sensory issues and not just physical ability issues, sensory issues as a result of autism and so forth. And so I think I actually think this might be, this will be a bit of a job to really raise, to really find businesses that are actually making their venues accessible. But I think it would be good for us to have a consideration to the range of access issues as part of this.
Thanks, Councillor Bolton. I'd like to echo Councillor Bolton's statements, but also that, I've also been on the disability working group. Actually, since I was elected to council, and wild horses are not going to drag me off that particular group because it's my favourite. And something that's been reported from the group, apart from the issues involving invisible disabilities and the fact that we're not really recognising that as well as we intend to, and hopefully we will, is that that group has reported that it doesn't see itself represented very well anywhere much in council. And I think this is, along with some work that we're doing with comms, a really valuable step towards starting to really recognise, as the Ability Fest did on the weekend, that there are people living with disability all around us, and they're a really important part of the community that we get around in. And I'm really excited about this happening. So I'm really excited that this category has been included in the awards, and I can think of quite a few people that should be nominated. So I guess I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? I'd like to declare that carried unanimously. And I'll now move on to DCF 2219, cyclist safety on John Street. Councillor Riley's on his feet.
Yes, thank you. I just want to commend the officers and the community who've actually had a lot of input into this motion, which is to actually improve the Brunswick East Shimmy route, which John Street is a major part of, and that the northern part of John Street is a narrower street, and so trying to get dedicated bicycle lanes in there, which was seriously being considered, is something that isn't being proposed tonight. But I'm rather excited by the fact that we are proposing to close the street from the northern end, so from the Albert Street end, and we're also wanting to upgrade the crossing at...
Let me just get you a second.
Sorry.
Seconder? Councillor Martin. Sorry, keep going. Okay, right. What's going to happen?
Beg your pardon. And that we're also wanting to do an upgraded treatment of the crossing at Glen Lyon Road, which there are also significant safety issues for. It's also, that will also provide an upgrade that will potentially allow a pedestrian crossing in the future. That's not proposed in this current what's being proposed tonight, but that's certainly will be built into the design so that when we can afford and actually advocate for that, to have that happen. And we actually have the members of Brunswick in the room tonight, so I'm hoping that we will be able to get that sooner than later, and Vic Roads would support that. But we're actually going to take a step in that direction and keep working on getting that happening. So I am rather excited about this work. It's been a long time coming, but it's really important that we get this happening because of the growth in that city. We've been talking about that tonight, and the impacts of population growth, the impacts of, and we're trying to see that pedestrian and cycling get a much better go in the city as opposed to motorised vehicles. And anytime we can do that, I think that's something the council will want to see that we do. So I want to move this and also nominate the 3 ward councillors, that's Dorney, Tapanos and myself, to the committee, because we now need to go through a public process to actually consider this and have more voices and more people make contributions as to whether this should in fact go ahead, because we're going to be closing the street.
I just want to clarify, we need a 4th councillor as well. Is there any other councillors who's interested? Well, I'm happy to put my hand up as the mayor, unless you're super keen.
I'll do it, yeah.
Councillor Martin. So we'll have councillors, the South Ward councillors as Dorney, Riley and Tapanos.
Maybe Riley is chair.
Yes.
Yep,
Deputy Mayor
sure.
is chair. Yeah.
So Councillor Riley is the chair. Thank you. Good suggestion. As the deputy mayor. I'm always up for a suggestion. Councillors Dorney, Tapanos and Martin as the 3 councillor representatives. Councillor Martin, would you like to speak to it as the second? Councillor Tapanos, once you finish your chocolate.
Thank you. No, I'm really pleased to see this one. And I know the new mid strategy will involve a number of similar traffic management studies and outcomes around road closures. And I think that is really positive, because we're seeing a lot of rut running. This in particular, John Street, is a no-brainer for me, considering what is coming. And the development that is occurring around the area. But also, it's a no-brainer because of what is occurring on Nicholson Street with the super stops. And we do need to provide a safe cycling avenue. And this is what John Street does. And we need to support that and encourage that as a major traffic option away from Nicholson Street. And we need to provide some protection for not just the residents of John Street, but also the whole precinct, and Albert in particular, which will be getting excessive traffic coming in and through John Street. So in my view, I'm keen to hear the residents' views about this, and I certainly have an open mind, but I see tremendous benefits by providing the block on John Street, because it would enable greater pedestrian, greater cycling, but also provide a lot of residential protection by stopping the running that occurs through there. So it's an easy one for me. It's a no-brainer, and we should be doing this as soon as possible. And I'm really pleased to see that it's here as one of the first ones, only a month after the strategy was adopted. And I do want to thank the Brunswick Residents Network in particular for their advocacy on this. I think it's been very important, and this is a good outcome.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Are there any other councillors? Are there any councillors that would like to speak against this motion? Okay, I think I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried. Thanks, Nick. DCF 2319, Tram Route 96, reconstruction of Tram Stop 22, Nicholson Street, Brunswick East. Do I have a mover for this report?
Yeah,
Councillor Riley
to move it with
and Councillor Carly Hannon as a seconder. Oh, did you want to put the amendment before?
Put it first, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, can I move the substantive with an additional amendment, please?
Put the point, sure.
Yeah, which was circulated, which is that the council writes to the Honourable Melissa Home, Minister for Public Transport, to request that any traffic modelling report undertaken of traffic flows in Brunswick Road and Nicholson Street associated with the proposed Tram Stop 22, Route 96, be made available to the public.
Okay, so you're happy with that, Councillor Carly Hannon? You're happy to
Yeah, that
second that?
sounds fine,
Yep,
yeah.
great. So go if you like, Councillor Riley.
Look, this is the final tram stop in our jurisdiction on Route 96. There's been some history to this. We tried to advocate for improved treatment for bicycles on this road, but that never occurred. I was instrumental in that, and I've learned a lot about how difficult it is to work with PTV, and we heard that earlier tonight in the chamber in terms of working around other matters related to the PTV. And I would like to flag that I think as a council, and I think as a group of councils around Victoria, we do need to get better relations and understanding about them. I have some reservations between plans that you do 4 or 5 years hence, and then somehow you come back and then you start to do that work, and there's this assumption that not much has changed. Well, I can assure you, if you live in Moreland, there's a whole lot that's changed in the last few months and weeks and years, and certainly over 4 or 5 years, there's been a big change. So I just wanted to support the notion of accessible stops. That's been something that this council's advocated for a long time. We've always supported that, although some people have used it as a political opportunity to say that we don't. In fact, we do. Accessible stops need to be here, and Route 96 is going to be the first that we can have that happen on. And this is just, the additional amendment is just trying to get some clarity around and basically send a signal to the Minister and to the Department of Public Transport Victoria that it's really important that we actually re-engage the community around the rationale and some of the reasons why you've actually got to the model that you have. So it's just asking for some indicators as to why, publicly available as to why we're modelling it the way we are. There's going to be a very long stop proposed to be south of Brunswick Road, which is a little bit like the one on Elgin Street, if people are familiar with Route 8 and 1. And it's quite a long, narrow stop, and this is where Nicholson Street does widen out there, and it's got also a historic and a very important bike path or shared path that crosses there. And there'll be railway, the old circular railway aspects will be taken out to provide for that, and they'll be reinserted. So there's some heritage issues there, which is good to see that that's going to be getting a treatment. But it's really important that I think that we get a bit more savvy around how the PTV works with our community and works with us as a council and brings us on board, and we actually understand and see the rationale for why they've landed on the model that they have.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Carly Hannon, would you like to speak to the motion? Any speakers against? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried. Now move to DCF 2419, traffic safety on Newlands Road. Councillor Bolton is on her feet.
Okay, I'd like to move an amended motion that was circulated earlier. Yep. Do you have that? Is that sent around?
Yep. I think everybody's got it.
Can we pull it up on the screen?
minutes.
Sorry.
Yep.
Minutes takers.
It's just there.
Yep, that's fine. Got a sec so we can catch up.
It's being moved with the amendment.
With the amendment, yes. I'm happy to second that for you, Councillor Bolton.
Alrighty. Okay, great. So, so this report comes out of a notice of motion earlier this year about traffic safety issues on Newlands Road, and a petition was presented at one of the last council meetings about the traffic safety issues. My amendment is really something which council will have to lobby VicRoads or apply to VicRoads for, but it is 2 extra points in addition to what was in the agenda. And I think there are some unique characteristics of Newlands Road which make these features especially important.
Can I just clarify something before you go on? At the point 3, I was under the impression it wasn't zebra crossing, it was pedestrian lights, because I'm not prepared to support a zebra crossing with flashing lights at the roundabout, but I will support pedestrian crossing with traffic lights.
Okay, well, I'm happy for that. I just want a safe pedestrian crossing.
So we just need to make some updates there because the cost is different. It's more like 200 to 250 rather than 150 to 200.
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
200 to 250, that's right. Or is it 250?
It's 250, okay, yeah. I saw those numbers between 150 and 250 and
So I'm happy with that change to that. So firstly on point 2, about the 40 kilometre speed limit, while it is true this is identified by council as a major road, not a local road, and it is a road that goes to an industrial site. On the other hand, it actually goes through a residential area, an area with a lot of young families because it's close to the primary school, close to parkland, playgrounds, etc. And it has, because there's a hill, and also a bend in the road, which makes vehicles difficult to see. The hill means that, or the slope of the road means that vehicles, including a lot of heavy vehicles, including cement trucks, etc., speed down the hill and also speed up the hill, or try and not lose speed going up the hill. But what that means is it is quite dangerous for local residents, especially elderly residents, anyone who's a bit frail, and also people with children trying to negotiate across this road to get to the primary school with kids and so forth. The second part of this is the lack of a pedestrian crossing at the McMahon's Road roundabout, which intersects with Newlands Road. This is a major thoroughfare, and there's no safe way of crossing the road. So, and especially if you have a pram or a couple of kids on scooters, there's no safe way of crossing the road. And it's not good enough to say that there's no demand for it, there aren't enough pedestrians crossing the road, because there'd be more pedestrians crossing the road if there was a safe crossing. And we know that people are having to do dangerous things to cross the road at that point in order to access Newlands Primary School. And this isn't just speeding cars, it is speeding large trucks. And we have to keep in mind that there is planning approval, or some of the large factory sites up the hill have been subdivided into much smaller factory sites, which means that there are a lot of extra trucks on that road. Upwards of 60 new factory sites at the top of the hill. So this is a major issue for the residents to confront. I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Councillor Bolton. I'd like to commend Councillor Bolton on all her work and endorse all the comments that she just made and explain why I wouldn't be endorsing the zebra crossing. Before the pedestrian crossing was created, where there was a zebra crossing further down the road in front of the service station, cars and trucks and all the traffic didn't stop on a regular basis. Now that I'm riding and the kids take off and ride ahead of me, I feel quite comfortable knowing that cars do stop now. There's a turning arrow. It's a really effective solution to what happens down at Carr Street, which there's a rat run from Sydney Road to Newlands Road via Carr Street. But there's also a real issue with traffic hurtling down the hill through that roundabout, and I think that a pedestrian crossing up there, and I don't know if Vic Roads will approve it, I don't know when we'll be able to get this happening, but I absolutely wholeheartedly support it, because from where the side that I've observed, people walk all the way from the other side of Sydney Road, across the Bakers Road Bridge, up McMahon's Road, off into the parkland to Newlands Road Primary, the Woolworths, the Coburg Hill shops, and various other locations on that side. And even though the bridge is still broken, people do cross down through the creek bed, especially now that it doesn't really rain anymore. So I am really keen to see some of this stuff, just calm what happens on Newlands Road, so that it's a bit safer, because it is a residential area, and I've lived in that neighbourhood since my children were born, and I have no plans to move anytime in the future. Is there a councillor that would like to speak against the motion? Councillor Kavanagh.
Yep. I'd like to speak against the motion. I foreshadow that if this is unsuccessful, I'll be moving the officer recommendation.
Sure.
First of all, I want to say to the officers, I think they've done a very good job. We had the petition a couple of months ago, and they've come back with a number of things on their report, which I'm in favour of. It is clear, though, that this is a collector road, and therefore we won't be gaining Vic Roads approval for either 40k an hour or for the pedestrian crossing. It won't reach the warrants. I know it's our road, but under the guidelines, it must reach 500 traffic movements in an hour, vehicle movements, and 100 pedestrian attempts in an hour, and it won't meet those two warrants. I accept that sometimes the warrants are incorrect. I know I've argued that on Moreland Road at one point, arguing that warrant, that current warrant is incorrect. But I know that this will not be acceptable to Vic Roads, and particularly because it is a collector road and because it does have industrial sites to the north. And so I'll be supporting the officer recommendation. I think it's got a couple of very good improvements to it, but I won't be supporting the other amendments.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Four, Councillor Riley.
Look, I appreciate Councillor Kavanagh's comments, and I get exactly where he's coming from, and I probably share his sentiment. However, as a user of this road, and because of the nature of the bend and the incline or decline, depending which way you're travelling on the road, I do think it actually is a slightly different case and I think the treatment trying to go for this benchmark is one way of trying to send that signal to our community, to Vic Roads, but also for us, if it's not successful, which I share your sentiment, Councillor Kavanagh, that it probably won't be successful on the grounds that you've actually mentioned, but I do think it's important that we at least make this claim so that in order we can actually get a better outcome, and I'm not suggesting officers haven't done their job, it is just a difficult terrain, and it is an important one that we actually try and get some sort of treatment on. So it's not an easy answer, but I think we are trying to send a signal that we actually need to get a much better treatment of this intersection and to slow that traffic down, particularly with all the trucks using it. So that's why I'm supporting it, even though I do share your concerns. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Davidson.
Can I just ask a question to officers about the type of road it is? So this is essentially a piece of advocacy that we're asking, we're imploring Vic Roads to consider. Are there examples where there's discretion that's been applied to these kinds of roads in the past? Is that something that we know, or is it just a blanket policy that they have?
I guess through the chair, the unique circumstance of this serving an industrial area and a residential area make it difficult to draw parallels to past decisions. I'm not aware of previous situations where Vic Road may have accepted a different outcome where it hasn't met the warrants that they specify.
Thank you. I suspect, did you want to speak to it?
Yeah, sure.
It's a guide, are we?
I'll be supporting the two additional amendments. I believe it's points 2 and 3 that Councillor Bolton's added in addition to the council officer's recommendation. Nothing more frustrating as a councillor than guidelines. For a long time I've thought that we should have a more safety along Duke's Road in Fawkner with the crossing officer, but it hasn't met the number of cars crossing and guidelines. And sometimes we need to look beyond that. I understand there's a lot of businesses in this area. I just want to reiterate that it's really important we continue to support those businesses, especially the shrinking number of industrial precincts in Moreland and areas for blue-collar workers to have employment in the area. But I do support that this is a unique road with a fairly sharp bend, very sharp incline that can cause a lot of concerns for community when crossing this road. So we need to have a special acknowledgement for that, and I believe that going to Vic Roads and applying for a 40-kilometre speed limit is in the best interest of the community. So I'm happy to support the amendments.
Thank you, Councillor Farnley. Councillor to speak against? I think I put that to the vote. All those in? Yeah, sure.
I think in answer to Councillor Kavanagh's comments about this being us having to get permission for Vic Roads and they won't give it to us, I think when there are special characteristics, I don't think it's good enough to just say we can't do anything. I think the council officers have to argue the special characteristics of this road. And, you know, I am an ex-heavy vehicle driver. I know what it would be, you know, I can appreciate some truck drivers might feel annoyed with a 40-kilometre-an-hour limit, but it's only for a short period and there are special characteristics of this road. And I think we've got to, I think we have to argue on the basis of those special characteristics. The other thing is, my understanding is Vic Roads was looking at changing its warrant system for pedestrian crossings, which was, I believe, one of the reasons why we got permission to have a pedestrian crossing on O'Hay Street at the May Street cross around that area, because I gather this is an issue in a number of areas where they have been denying pedestrian crossings when there's a clear need for a pedestrian crossing. For instance, I wouldn't stroll across Bell Street in between the traffic lights if there was no pedestrian crossing there. Yes, it would look like there's no demand for people to cross Bell Street, but actually there is. So, I mean, it's a chicken and egg kind of argument, and I just don't think we can accept that. I think they're unique characteristics of this road, and we know that there are certain things which draw people across the road, such as the primary school. So I think we simply have to argue on that basis and campaign on behalf of resident safety.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. I'll put that to the vote now. All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried.
About division?
You want a division?
Yeah.
Okay, all those in favour? So Councillor Bolton, Carly Hannon, Davidson, Riley, Davidson, Riley. There's a lot of flu around, isn't there? Abood, Irfanli, Tapanos, and Yildiz. We said. And against, Councillor Kavanagh. Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Right up high. All righty.
Just for myself.
I just want to acknowledge that Councillors Dorney and Martin have gone home incredibly ill, and you may have noticed the season is upon us to get a hideous cold, so look after yourself. I'll move on now to DCF 2519, East Brunswick Village, managing traffic impact on east of Nicholson Street. Do I have a mover for this report? Councillor Kavanagh.
I'm happy to second.
Councillor Riley will second. Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh.
Just briefly, just to say, I think the officer's done a very good job here. Once again, we've had a fair bit of angst in that East Brunswick Village area, and I think they've come up with a couple of pleasing solutions there. And obviously, we're open to even doing even more if they prove not as effective as what we're hoping. So, I thank the residents for bringing it to our attention, and thank the officers for their work.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. And are you nominating South Ward councillors?
Yes.
At point 3?
Yes, sorry, I meant to do that.
Councillor Riley, would you like to chair that as well as the deputy?
Excellent.
And then Councillors Tapanos and Dorney.
Yep, that's excellent, thank you.
Yep, and I'm happy to make up the 4th councillor. Please do.
I just want to speak briefly and thank Councillor Kavanagh for moving this, and to everybody who's actually worked on this matter. It was something that the community became quite concerned about and wanted to know what was happening after we noticed that the accessible stop, which would have been at Main Street where the East Brunswick Village is going up, has been moved further north, and then that created a whole raft of consequential impacts on the local streets. So I'm really happy to see this happening, particularly post the Moreland Integrated Transport Strategy, that we're able to actually move quickly on looking at closing a couple of streets because of the impact of new developments, new population, and the implications they have. So I just really wanted to acknowledge the community for all of their efforts and some of them are in the room tonight, thank you so much for getting excellent data together that really helped support the work that officers were doing and to bring this to a good, judicious, timely conclusion. So thanks so much for all your work, Justin.
Now we know why you're here. Are there any councillors that would like to speak against this motion? No? I think I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. Okay, the next report we have to consider this evening is DBT 719 2017-18 Performance Report Audit and Risk Management Committee. Moved by Councillor Riley and Councillor Irfanli. Councillor Riley, would you like to speak to us?
Yes, I just wanted, this is one of the first reports of this type in recent times. So the work of the committee is quite extensive. It really does get into many aspects of what we do as a council and gets into every nook and cranny of the workers' day-to-day jobs. And I think that this report can be a bit dry for some people, but I would hope that when we're trying to manage and reduce risk and improve performance, that these kinds of reports are very important. So I just wanted to thank the team, particularly the team who are working through this period, because there's been a bit of change internally in the staffing, and the team really stepped up and managed to deliver lots of paperwork for the meeting that the Audit and Risk Committee had recently, which was my first that I was able to attend. So I'm rather pleased to be able to move this report. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Irfanli, would you like to speak? Any councillors like to speak against the motion? No, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. DBT 819, the Governance Report, April 2019 Cyclical Report. Do I have a mover for this report? Do you need to put in an amendment? Did you want to move this with the amendment that we've been talking about?
It's up to you. Yeah, okay, do it.
So would you like to propose?
So it would be, so you'll need someone to move it.
Yeah. Okay, so Councillor Riley.
I'm not fussed either way.
And I'm happy to second. And then what you'll need to do is propose an amendment adding your point, which is that, do you want me to say it?
Yes, say it.
Okay, so what's happened is Councillor Martin was approved to go to ALGA, but Councillor Martin is not going to ALGA because he's been asked to speak at another event. So what we are intending to do, or Councillor Yildiz is going to propose an amendment that reads something. Oh, there it is. Oh no, that's the motion. Probably a 6.6 that reads substitute Councillor Yildiz. Councillor Yildiz for Councillor Martin to attend the ALGA conference in June.
I'd make the comment that if there's an issue, I'll...
Yes, that's fine. Any of us can cancel our attendance, but it needs to be approved for us to go. So because we've already approved 4 councillors, we can substitute. Councillor Martin said he's not going because he's unavailable now. And
if I can't go, can another councillor be substituted as well?
Just 3 councillors. What do we need 4?
What about Nick? No, sorry.
You might as well go.
Okay. Yes.
I'm happy to accept that amendment. And I don't need to speak to the motion in any great detail because this is an omnibus report, and I just there are some important papers from the Human Rights Committee, etc., which I found enlightening. But I would encourage people to keep an eye on this report because there's a lot in it sometimes, and it's worth gleaning what is of interest to people. Thanks.
Great. I'd just like to add as the seconder the importance of, one is to note that this is where the questions taken on notice are hidden now, so they're hidden in plain sight, but also to draw attention to point 5, which is that we are endorsing the motion to be submitted to the ALGA National General Assembly, which was put by the City of Greater Dandenong regarding the Status Resolution Support Services Program, and that this is a campaign called Back Your Neighbour, and I would encourage everyone to check it out on Facebook and support it, and it talks about asking the federal government to reinstate cuts that have been made to status resolution support services, such a mouthful I can hardly say it, because the impact of losing that small amount of funding through the community has very far-reaching repercussions for everybody who's trying to access any type of support services, not just the people who are asylum seekers and refugees, and there is a growing problem of great disadvantage occurring in it, and this is one thing that addresses part of that issue. So I just wanted to draw attention to the fact that this is also included in the omnibus. Are there any councillors that would like to speak against the governance report motion and its extra point? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. The next report we have to consider is EMF 1119, the Financial Management Report for this period ended 28th of February 2019. I have a mover for the financial report. Councillor Carly Hannon and seconded by Councillor Riley. Councillor Carly Hannon, would you like to speak? No? Preserve. Councillor Riley, would you like to speak?
I just want to say I want to commend the officers and everyone. The finances are in very good shape from my reading, and some of that is on the revenue side because we are actually bringing in some extra revenue. We have spent quite a lot more in capital, but that's mainly related to our open space acquisition, some of it which was foisted upon us, shall I use that word, because some of the ongoing lands around the Merri Creek and further to our west, which is as well. Then we had some other open space that have been sold by VicTrack and by PTV. We've acquired those to keep them in as open space.
Outlook Drive.
Outlook Drive, thank you, Councillor Bolton. And but it also, so that figure in there contains also the park close to home acquisitions that we've had at West Street and so on. So it's actually a combined open space. I'd like to see that segregated a bit personally, but just because it highlights what we had a real sort of choice in and what we kind of had to sort of be the step up to and actually cover the acquisition of and keep that in public hands. So putting that aside, I think the figures are looking really good, and I want to commend the staff for the work they do in keeping that transparency and keeping our finances in good shape, because it's really important for the work we're doing in terms of our strategies and for the budget, which we're about to consider as well. It really does help us. And I continually scratch my head and wonder how I managed to get a term as a councillor when we have the finances like we do, because I haven't always been like this, and I'm sure Councillor Kavanagh or others who've been around longer will know that the city wasn't always in this healthier state. So it's a really positive outlook, and I just want to commend that work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Are there any councillors against adopting the finance report? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Okay, so the next report is DCI 319, contract. It is a contract. Fuel Card Services D19 106172. I have a mover for this report. Councillor Bolton. Seconder. Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Bolton, would you like to speak to it? Right. Councillor Kavanagh?
No, it's fine, thanks.
Okay, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Now, I'll now move, councillors, that concludes the presentation of officer reports, and I'd now like to move to notices of motion. I'll ask you, please, councillors, to start by stating the motion and then provide a brief background. The first notice of motion we have this evening is notice of motion 1219, fee waiver of the Glenroy Arts Group. Councillor Davidson.
Yes, so it's quite self-explanatory. The Glenroy Arts Group are having an exhibition on the 3rd of May to the 5th of May. The fee for the hall hire is estimated to be $345, which they are unable to cover. And I'm asking for a seconder.
Councillor Kavanagh's already said that he's happy to second. Thank you. Councillor Davidson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah.
Or do you feel like you've covered everything? Yeah, it's pretty straightforward.
It is.
Yep. Councillor Kavanagh?
I just commend Councillor Davidson. She got on this before I did, and I'm really pleased to have So apologies to the art group for...
Okay, I'd just like to add something. The hall hire policy has been completely rejigged, and the idea is that some of these hall hire waivers would come through the chamber, and that's what has been happening, and I'm quite happy to support the fee waiver in this situation. So I'm happy to support the motion. Are there any councillors that would like to speak against it? No? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried.
Can I ask that we notify them as well, because it's quite a quick turnaround?
Yep. That's no problem. Thank you. The next notice of motion we have is notice of motion 1319, the waiver of hall hire fees for the West Papuan Community CD launch, and Councillor Bolton is on her feet and Councillor Riley is the seconder.
That's good. Well, we actually heard from a member of the community and someone who works with the community. The West Papuan community is quite a small community, and these are basically refugees from West Papua who arrived as a little group about, 10, 15 years ago in Australia by boat. And there are a lot of really terrible things happening at the moment in West Papua at the moment. A lot of, it's a total inequity what's happening to the West Papuan people in West Papua, under sort of their land being totally occupied for a number of decades. I think we do want to support this quite small community to be able to hold their CD launch. This is, fits in with council's policies in terms of supporting an inclusive community, but also supporting a really struggling community, because it is quite a poor part of the refugee community. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton.
Just briefly, I just want to reiterate Councillor Bolton's remarks. I have been very concerned about this community and what is going on in the Indonesian controlled area of West Papua, but rather than focus on that tonight, I just want to say that this is a good example of community development in action, and this is one way the council can support that. It's not a huge contribution that we're making, but it is a concern regarding the number of small community that we have and the resources or the lack of resources they have. So I think anything we can do in these small ways is great at building their resilience and providing them a voice to be able to get to celebrate their culture and share that with the broader Australian community, while at the same time addressing some major human rights issues on our doorstep to the north. Even though it's not a local council issue, human rights are an issue for us, and West Papuans and people in these sort of situations live in our communities, and to me that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Any other councillors like to speak? Councillor Kavanagh?
I want to speak in favour too. Can I just say that I was lucky to go last year and thoroughly enjoyed it, and it was great to see Bishop Hilton Deacon there, who's been a strong supporter of the West Papua people for a long, long time.
Excellent. So I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. Notice of motion 1419, celebrating recent acquisition of public lands put up for sale by state agencies. Councillor Riley?
Yes, and we've just mentioned this, already a couple of times tonight, so I'm not going to labour it except to say that we've had to acquire some land, and what this motion is asking us to do as a council is to look at how we can actually celebrate that, essentially by using the programs we already have in terms of rolling out equipment, play equipment, planting of trees and things that we're already doing, but in a way that actually acknowledges the fact that we've actually now own that land. In the past, we only looked after it on the behalf of those agencies for many, many years, and now we actually own it, and it'd be a good way to actually mark the work of the communities in bringing that into our ownership, and do it in a way that actually celebrates what Moreland is about.
And I'm happy to second that for you.
Thank you. Oh, sorry.
It's okay. Just check.
Just put it.
And I'm happy to second. Yeah. So I think I can reserve the right to speak. And are there any councillors that would like to speak against this notice of motion? I'll just put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Okay, that concludes our notices of motion, notices of rescission. Councillors, we have no notices of rescission. Is that the right way that I'm saying that? Rescission. I'd now like to move on to foreshadowed items. Are there any councillors who have any foreshadowed items? No? Then we'll move on to the urgent business. Councillors, we have one urgent business request tonight. Councillor Tapanos, would you give us a very brief outline about the urgent business item?
I rise to seek that we include this on the agenda first and foremost, and it is also a request to waive hall fees for the Brunswick Town Hall for the Ethnic Communities Council of Victoria, and they're planning a forum, I believe, in early next month, and it's going to be related to migrant communities and the upcoming federal election, and all candidates and political parties will be invited to participate. It'll be a Q&A session, and it'll be open to the community. So I think it's a good forum and very timely to be raising those issues now. I note that the Prime Minister is about to visit the Governor-General and call an election tomorrow, so I think it would be quite beneficial for our community to hear from organisations like the Ethnic Communities Council of Victoria through forums. So I'm proposing that we include it because it's urgent, because the forum will be prior to the next council meeting.
So do I have second?
Or you, whichever.
Okay. Councillor Bolton. Okay, so Councillors Tapanos and Bolton proposing that it be an urgent business item. Is there any debate about this being an urgent business item, first and foremost? And if not, I'll put that to the vote. So all those in favour of dealing with it this evening, I'll call that carried. So Councillor...
I move, I don't need to speak again.
Yeah, okay, sure. So Councillor Tapanos is moving that we waive the hall hire fees for the Ethnic Communities Council of Victoria so that they can conduct a forum at the Brunswick Town Hall. And do we have a seconder for that? Did you want to second that as again? So, and Councillor Bolton will second the motion. And you've already spoken to it. Councillor Bolton, would you like to speak to it? No? I'll just put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried.
Just have that noted as unanimous.
So we'll just put that noted as unanimous. Councillors, I'd now like to move onto the confidential business section of the agenda. And so I would like to bid citizen journalists and the other type of journalists good night. Former mayors, thank you all for coming, and everybody who's been watching and probably commenting online, thank you all very much.